Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. People in Marvel. Sign in at the beginning of God-level perception. Chapter 41. Mazefakel. Looking at Chen Yun, who suddenly appeared from behind, Nick Fury asked in shock, "Why are you here?" "Well, you didn't ask me to come. The plane that picked you up hasn't taken off yet." Nick Fury touched his bald head, as if he wanted to find out how Chen Yun did it, but he opened his mouth, and finally changed the topic to the new discovery of S.H.I.E.L.D. "You came just in time. Hurry up and follow me." Nick Fury hurriedly led the way and led Chen Yun to a room. As soon as he entered the door, a gust of icy cold air rushed straight to Chen Yun's face. Chen Yun took a closer look, and in the thick white cold air, a huge ice block several meters high was standing in the room. And the most unique among them is a figure frozen in it. The figure is dressed in a red, white and blue star-striped costume and holds an oval shield in his hand. Sure enough, it's Captain America. Going around to the back, Chen Yun nodded after seeing the iconic American buttocks. When will he wake up? I don't know, it's good to be alive. Nick Fury glanced at the frozen Captain America, and asked Chen Yun, "Do you have any abilities that can solve this ice cube? Do you think I'm Doraemon?" Chen Yun looked at Nick Fury speechlessly, and said dissatisfiedly, "I'm not good at everything. You were still in Midtown just now, and you arrived here in less than half a minute." Nick Fury said with a see-through expression, "You must have other abilities that you haven't reported. Also, the matter of you buying lottery tickets is still suppressed by the Bureau for you." Mazefakel. Looking at Chen Yun enviously, Nick Fury advised earnestly, "That's 1,000 million US. Don't use your abilities to do bad things. I'm just lucky." Just as Chen Yun made an excuse, he was interrupted by Nick Fury, "It just needs your luck." After speaking, Nick Fury explained the current situation of Captain America. Although the current US team is frozen, there are still vital signs. But in case the thawing is completed, if the US team dies because of the thawing, doesn't it mean that S.H.I.E.L.D. killed the US team? We're going to unfreeze Captain America later, so you stay here as a mascot. Okay. Chen Yun looked at Nick Fury speechlessly, then found a chair in the room and sat down. Looking at the colleagues busy around the ice cubes, Chen Yun expressed his thoughts, "Why don't you try the microwave oven?" Mazefakel. Sitting on a chair and eating the food brought back from the restaurant, Chen Yun felt as if he had really become a mascot. But because he knew the plot, Chen Yun naturally didn't have any worries in his heart. This is Captain America, the flag of the Avengers. Chen Yun ate the donuts calmly, sipping coffee from time to time, watching Captain America's unblocking process like watching a play. S.H.I.E.L.D. is indeed an organization with the most sophisticated technology, and soon the ice was chipped away, leaving only the small piece where Captain America was. With chunks of ice chipped away, Cap was moved to a bed. In order to resist the biting cold, the staff put on heavy winter clothes. Starting from the head and feet, use a thermal pen to carefully melt the ice on Captain America. Soon, Captain America's head was exposed. He's still breathing. A miracle. It's a miracle. When the head was exposed, the staff were surprised to find Captain America who was still breathing. It was faint, but he did survive. Maybe in a few days, he will wake up. After listening to his subordinate's report, Nick Fury patted Chen Yun on the shoulder excitedly, "Good job. Sure enough, it was right to call you over. You're the lucky guy from S.H.I.E.L.D. Glancing at the calm Chen Yun, Nick Fury said with a smile, "I'll give you a bonus." "Well, but I didn't do anything." Chen Yun was a little embarrassed when he heard that the bonus was going to be given out. But in line with the spirit that mosquito legs are also meat, he accepted the bonus calmly. Now that the US team has been revived, Chen Yun also left the room. Wandering around S.H.I.E.L.D., Chen Yun discovered something. Whenever he tried to greet other people, they avoided him. Not only that, there were even people whispering to Chen Yun. What's going on here? Chen Yun didn't understand, so he continued to walk around the S.H.I.E.L.D., full of doubts until he met Gemma. "They're all passing on you. You are the matter of the silencer." Gemma hesitated to tell the truth. To be honest, if it wasn't for the fact that Chen Yun had made a big fuss in the restaurant before. Based on Chen Yun's reputation as Batman, he has long been famous in S.H.I.E.L.D. That's it. As for, Chen Yun shrugged speechlessly, turned around and walked towards the training room. He hasn't been there since the last time he showed his abilities. As soon as he entered the door of the training room, Chen Yun saw Hawkeye Button, who was practicing archery hard. Patton was dressed in a close-fitting short jacket and held his iconic bow in his hand. "Hey buddy, good to see you." Chen Yun waved his hand at Barton, and said with a smile, "How are you? How have you been recently?" Hearing the sound, Barton stopped training and raised his hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead. Casually shot the last arrow in his hand, and the arrow accurately hit the bullseye of the distant archery target. "Chen, when did you come back?" Barton grinned and said, with a bright smile on his face. Looking at Chen Yun, Barton was as enthusiastic as seeing an old friend. "Well, because of the buttocks, no, because of Captain America." Chen Yun also replied with a smile, and then walked to Barton's side. Looking at the densely packed arrows on the target of the archery target in the distance, Chen Yun took a deep breath. "This is too accurate. You come to try." Seeing that Chen Yun was interested in archery, Barton handed the bow in his hand to Chen Yun. "Let me see what Batman is capable of." Taking the bow, Chen Yun said with a troubled face, "I don't know anything about bows and arrows." "It's okay, I will teach you." After finishing speaking, Barton directed Chen Yun to stand outside a white line. "Put your shoulders flat, separate your feet, and raise your bow to your chest." After Chen Yun stopped in a standard manner, Barton took out an arrow from his quiver. "Pinch the tail of the arrow and draw the bowstring." Finally, after a pause, Barton said sincerely, "Keep your eyes on the target and shoot the arrow." After listening to Barton's bow and arrow teaching, Chen Yun shot the arrow based on his feeling. With a sound of whoosh, the arrow flew out. The off-string arrow hit the target in a flash, and hit the bull's eye. "Well, this is newbie's luck." Seeing the result, Chen Yun was stunned for a moment, but he continued to draw and shoot without any delay. Under Barton's dumbfounded gaze, they all hit the bull's eye. After shooting all the arrows in the quiver, Chen Yun put down the bow in his hand. Do you know nothing about bows and arrows?" Turning around, he saw the shocked Hawkeye Barton. "Well, maybe." Shrugging his shoulders, Chen Yun brought another set of quiver full of arrows. In the middle of shooting the arrow just now, he felt a strange feeling. Pulling the bow again, Chen Yun slowly closed his eyes. Looking at Chen Yun with his eyes closed tightly, Barton had something stuck in his throat, and he didn't know whether to say it or not. But then, the thing that stunned him happened again. No matter whether he closed his eyes or turned his body around, as long as Chen Yun could shoot the arrow, he would be able to accurately hit the target's bull's eye. No matter how good Patton's mentality was and how elegant his personality was, he really couldn't hold on. Looking at Chen Yun, who is so successful, Barton only felt that he had practiced bow and arrow for more than 10 years, and he had practiced to the stomach of a dog. Chen Yun, who was immersed in shooting, didn't know Barton's mental journey at all. He only knew that whenever he shot a bow and arrow, there would be a strange hit rate bonus. Not even the bow and arrow, when he put down the bow and picked up the dart, that feeling was always lingering in his body. Is it the effect of the lucky halo? Or is it the effect of Sharingan? Throwing the dart in doubt, Chen Yun was speechless, seeing the result that he still hit the target. There are too many abilities, sometimes it is an annoyance. He let out a long sigh, and suddenly felt that he had lost the fun of shooting. Looking at Chen Yun, who was sighing while hitting the target, Barton could only feel bitterness at the corner of his mouth and sour water in his stomach. This Versailles behavior made Barton feel insulted by his daily hard work. "Try the gun again." Seeing Chen Yun throwing away the dart in a dispirited manner, Barton immediately leaned forward, even with an excited expression on his face. Because he had joined forces with Chen Yun on a mission and was saved by Chen Yun. After Barton returned to S.H.I.E.L.D., he checked Chen Yun's information curiously. Chen Yun is under the age, and cannot apply for a gun license in the beautiful country. And so, although Chen Yun is very talented in bows and arrows, he must have never touched a gun before. Holding Barton, who had saved face on firearms, his mentality immediately improved a lot. He smiled and took out a pistol, and patted it in front of Chen Yun. Pistol. Looking at the pistol in front of him, Chen Yun showed joy on his face. Ever since he traveled to this world, the thing that made Chen Yun want to move the most were guns. In this free and beautiful country, where guns are fought every day, if you say you haven't played with guns, it's a waste of time. Can I use it? After all, my age. Picking up the pistol curiously, Chen Yun salivated all over his face. Of course, from the moment you put on the shield uniform. Barton smiled and said confidently, you can use any weapon in this world with confidence. Immediately afterwards, the confident Barton began to teach Chen Yun how to use a pistol. Watching Chen Yun clumsily open the safety of the pistol, the smile on Patton's face became even brighter. But soon, Barton was dumbfounded. Obviously, 3 minutes ago, even the safety of the pistol would not be turned on, but 3 minutes later. Boom, 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 single quote. After emptying all the bullets in the magazine, Chen Yun looked at Barton excitedly, excuse me for another target paper. Hold on. Barton numbly walked to the side, replaced the target paper with a new one, and then he squatted in the corner autistically, looking at the smashed bullseye target with endless emotion in his heart. This is a lunatic. By the time Chen Yun finished his addiction, Barton had already been beaten to the point where he was completely bruised. It's so cool. A man's romance really has to be a gun. From pistols to rifles, Chen Yun had a great time playing, and his desire to play with firearms has been greatly satisfied today. But when Chen Yun packed his things and was about to leave, Button suddenly stopped him. Button, who didn't want to admit defeat, made a proposal. Chen, shall we practice duel once? Thinking of the fighting skills he had practiced countless times between life and death, Barton gritted his teeth. This is the only way he can earn back face. Even though Chen Yun was able to cut off Jin Bing's arm with his supernatural power, it was only about his skill. Chen Yun, whose body is still developing, is definitely not as experienced as himself. The confident Barton said calmly, come on, let me try your skills. Are you sure? Chen Yun asked cautiously. Seeing that Barton was still nodding, he could only walk to the center of the venue with a headache. It's not that he doesn't want to practice against Barton, it's that he has too many abilities. Not to mention Patton, even the unparalleled Captain America, he can confidently fight him now. Come on then. Taking off the windbreaker that was in the way, Chen Yun gestured for Barton to start. Barton kept squinting his eyes slightly, staring at Chen Yun while also concentrating on it. Following Chen Yun's words, he rushed towards Chen Yun without hesitation, and raised his left hand to attack. This set of actions was extremely fast, but in Chen Yun's view, it seemed slow. In his eyes, Barton's movements were full of flaws. The moment Patton rushed up, Chen Yun's right leg suddenly swept out, kicking him directly in the lower abdomen, kicking Patton flying out. Come again. After landing, Barton suddenly rolled over and stood up again. At the same time, he secretly sighed in his heart, as expected of the person who cut off Jin Bing's arm, his fighting ability is so strong. But since it is a competition, there must be winners and losers. Even if he is confident that his experience is far superior to that of Chen Yun, he will never give up any chance. Barton once again launched a new round of offense. But this time, Barton's movements became a bit more aggressive. Then, I surrender. Flying sideways again, Barton didn't choose to stand up, but instead looked at the ceiling of the training room hopelessly. The moment he was knocked into the air again, Barton realized that he couldn't beat him at all. What kind of fighting technique is this? Can you teach me? Listening to Barton's pleading request, Chen Yun fell silent. He doesn't know any fighting skills at all, it's an instinctive reaction based on God-level induction. When the scene was in an embarrassing situation, the communicator placed aside suddenly rang. Chen, Button, there is an urgent mission. In the communicator, Nick Fury's anxious and commanding voice came out, the military sent us a request, and they need our immediate support. Tony Stark, something happened. In the Middle East, somewhere on a plain where not a single blade of grass grows. A well-equipped armed forces of the United States is being repaired on the ground. It has been more than a day since Tony Stark disappeared, and the famous business tycoon has still not been found. A suffocating tension has begun to permeate the camp. At first, the military thought that Tony Stark had been killed in the terrorist attack, but the body was not found. But recently, they made a new discovery. In a land of blood, they extracted Tony Stark's NDA. This proves that Tony Stark is still alive. But at the same time, he must have been seriously injured, and he was also captured by terrorists. Asshole, why haven't these SHIELDs come here yet? After spitting viciously, Colonel Roddy threw the gun in his hand aside. As one of Tony Stark's few friends, Colonel Rhodey was fidgeting like an ant on a hot pot these days when Tony Stark was missing. S.H.I.E.L.D. was notified last night. Rubbing his temples irritably, Rhodey picked up the binoculars placed next to him and looked into the distance. In the end, there is nothing but barrenness. But the question is, when will the people from S.H.I.E.L.D. come over? While Rhodey was cursing in his heart, a fighter plane arrived above the camp. Before the fighter plane landed, Rhodey felt a blur in front of his eyes, and a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. The figure was wearing a black combat uniform and a pair of sunglasses on his face. My God, you are finally here. Rhodey heaved a sigh of relief, and then approached the figure. We have been looking for a day and a night. Saying hello to the figure, Rhodey looked up at the fighter plane above his head again. How many people are here from your S.H.I.E.L.D.? Just me. The figure is naturally Chen Yun. Because of Nick Fury's deliberate delay, he has not arrived in the Middle East until now. Glancing at Luo Di, Chen Yun found a chair and sat down with a relaxed expression. Only you. Rhodey was obviously taken aback, and immediately reacted, the fighter above it. Fly back, what else can I do? Chen Yun curled his lips and said with a smile, such a big guy, apart from allowing terrorists to discover us and pose a threat to Tony's safety, what else can it do? That can't just be. The corner of Luo Di's mouth twitched. This guy with barely any hair really thinks of himself as a god. This is the Middle East. There are tens of thousands of kilometers of grass alone. With Chen Yun alone, how dare he speak so brazenly? Thinking of this, Colonel Luo Di became furious, and looking at Chen Yun with a relaxed expression, he became even more furious. Your identity. Walking in front of Chen Yun, Colonel Luo Di asked with a livid face, Agent Level. Level Agent, Batman. Batman. Rhodey was thinking about the name, and suddenly remembered the person who had become famous in New York recently. After figuring out that Chen Yun was just an agent for catching common criminals and not the elite of S.H.I.E.L.D. as he imagined, Rhodey couldn't help but curse secretly, but since S.H.I.E.L.D. sent Chen Yun, the only choice was to see if he was capable. Glancing at the sullen Rhodey, Chen Yun continued to sit on the chair, thinking about his newly acquired ability, his expression still relaxed. Last night, he got a new ability. Sleep prophecy. Any doubts Chen Yun may have can be answered through sleep. As soon as he obtained the ability, Chen Yun had already found Tony Stark through prophecy. Now Tony is being arranged to blacksmith in a cave house somewhere. Although the conditions were a bit tough, he didn't have to worry about safety. Can we go? Seeing that Chen Yun didn't take any action, Luo Di couldn't help it, and he walked over with a sullen face. No, not yet. What are these, tank munitions? Yes. Rhodey, who was originally dissatisfied with S.H.I.E.L.D. for only sending Chen Yun over, was feeling extremely depressed at the moment. Looking at Chen Yun who was wandering around like a tourist, the anger in his heart couldn't be suppressed. It just so happened that a water-carrying soldier next to him knocked down the bucket he was transporting. The crystal-clear water sprinkled on the ground was quickly absorbed by the dry land. Fool, do you know how hard it is to get a bucket of water here? Rhodey kicked the soldier's leg horizontally, and shouted angrily, your company has no water today. After spraying away the ashamed soldier, Luo Di turned his gaze to Chen Yun again. With every passing minute, Tony's life is in greater danger. Staring at Chen Yun with sharp eyes, Luo Di said unhappily, I hope you can participate in the mission sooner. Don't be angry, I will be there as soon as possible. Shrugging his shoulders, Chen Yun opened Sharingan in the dark, after the afternoon nap, I will act. You still want to take a nap? After listening to Chen Yun's words, the veins on Luo Di's forehead almost burst. After standing there for a long time, he barely suppressed the anger in his heart, and walked aside with a gloomy face. Time to eat. At this moment, a soldier walked up to Chen Yun with disdain, and dropped a portion of food and a communicator. Wait, where's my water? Glancing at the food, Chen Yun, who was studying Sharingan, asked dissatisfied with the soldiers, why is there no water in my lunch? No, the soldier said with a half-smile, and then opened the kettle he carried with him and took a sip. Boy, recognize the reality. Here, I am the boss. After giving Chen Yun a contemptuous look, the soldier turned around and was about to leave. But before he left, he heard exclamations from around, and his sight suddenly became lower and lower. He wanted to take another look at the situation, but found that his eyes were getting darker and darker. With a bang, the soldier's head fell to the ground. What are you doing? The enraged Luo Di rushed towards Chen Yun, his eyes bursting with anger. Why did you kill him? The surrounding soldiers also pointed their guns at Chen Yun, who was still holding the hidden blade, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Looking at the heads of the soldiers on the ground, Chen Yun with red eyes shook his head. The side effect of Sharingan is really. Sheathing the hidden blade, he activated the time ability. The time traveler's pocket watch. In an instant, Chen Yun returned to 5 minutes ago. At the moment when the water soldier was about to fall, Chen Yun grabbed the bucket from the side. Amidst the soldier's thanks, Chen Yun walked up to the soldier who delivered the meals. Snatching the rice and the communicator from Da Bing, Chen Yun walked into the tent expressionlessly. This guy is really cool. Chen Yun's fluent operation stunned the soldiers who originally wanted to give Chen Yun a run for their money. Even Rodi, who witnessed all this, couldn't help but praise. As expected of a member of S.H.I.E.L.D., this character. Enough men. There are 3 caves in the sunken basin. As soon as he entered the tent, 2 constantly rotating Guyu appeared in Chen Yun's eyes. Relying on the copying ability of Sharingan, Chen Yun drew all the scenes that appeared in his dream last night on paper. Soon, a topographic map appeared in front of Chen Yun. Comparing with the map one by one, Chen Yun found the place where Tony Stark was imprisoned very easily. After activating the ability, Chen Yun disappeared from the tent in an instant. Do you need water? As soon as Chen Yun left, Colonel Luo Di's voice came from outside the tent. Using water delivery as an excuse, Luo Di was about to enter the tent and urged Chen Yun to act quickly. But after waiting for a long time, Rodi still didn't get a response. He opened the curtain and walked into the tent in doubt. But as soon as he entered the door, Rodi was dumbfounded. In the small space of the tent, there was no sign of Chen Yun at all. What about people? Seeing Chen Yun enter the tent with his own eyes, Rodi, who never left his eyes, was stunned. Where did that kid go? After turning the tent upside down, Luo Di never found any trace of Chen Yun. He quickly went to the camp to search again, but he searched the entire camp but did not find Chen Yun. Did you go out in a car? Frowning, Rodi came to the place where the vehicles were placed in the camp. But when he saw the number of cars that hadn't decreased, Rodi's eyes were filled with disbelief. In this ghost place, Chen Yun actually disappeared on 2 legs. Asshole. Cursing, Roddy took out the communicator. By the time the call was transferred to Nick Fury, Roddy had already run out of patience. Your people are missing in the camp. This is a dangerous no man's land. Tony Stark has involved all our troops. After finishing speaking in one breath, Colonel Roddy said viciously, it is impossible for me to send someone to look for him again. Mazefakel. As soon as he picked up the phone, he was told a lot by himself. Nick Fury didn't understand, so he asked, who is missing? Is it Chen Yun? That's right, that Batman. Touching his bald head, Nick Fury breathed a sigh of relief. Don't worry about him, he'll be fine. Thinking of Chen Yun's endless variety of abilities, Nick Fury said with a smile, maybe he has found Tony. Just with his 2 legs. Just as he was about to taunt, Colonel Roddy heard the beep sound of the call being hung up. S.H.I.E.L.D. Depressedly throwing away the phone, Colonel Roddy only felt that he was in a terrible mood. On the other side, Chen Yun, who activated his teleportation ability, had already arrived at a cave. With God-level perception, Chen Yun easily avoided the patrolling terrorists. In a hut, he found the camp's monitoring room. While the people in the room were going out, Chen Yun walked in smoothly. From the numerous surveillance images, he quickly found the trace of Tony Stark in one image. This business tycoon in charge of trillions of dollars and a famous playboy was holding a hammer with a displeased face, and knocked on the iron block in front of him numbly. Different from the glamorous appearance in the past, Tony Stark is now dressed in shabby clothes, and his face is covered with blood-stained gauze. It can be seen from the way he raises his arm that he still has a bandage on his left arm and a crude device on his chest. Is this the original version of Iron Man? Looking at Tony struggling to strike iron, Chen Yun admired, as expected of the smartest person in the Avengers, such simple equipment can make such equipment. His eyes turned to the crude device on Tony's chest, which was also the prototype of the later famous micro-reactor. Although it looks crude, it is an energy heart built by 2 highly intelligent people, Tony and Dr. Ethan. But it is enough to provide a huge amount of energy to keep the heart beating for 10 lifetimes and maintain flight for more minutes. It seems that I don't need to take action. They can find a way to escape by themselves. After a few glances, Chen Yun was relieved. To be honest, Chen Yun was still a little worried about this action. Worried that because of his appearance, the Iron Man who had been shining so brilliantly would die in his womb. Without this ordeal, perhaps Tony Stark would still be the playboy who was having a good time, and the Iron Man who should have appeared would naturally not appear. In order to avoid changing history by himself, Chen Yun decided not to bother Tony for the time being, and only waited for him to make a move later when needed. Feeling relieved, Chen Yun simply sat down in the monitoring room. After sitting for a while, several terrorists walked into the monitoring room with food in their hands, surrounded by a strong man with tattoos on his face. Seeing Chen Yun, who was sitting in the monitoring room generously, the burly man's expression changed immediately, and he was about to shout and ask. Writing round eyes. Before the burly man could speak, Chen Yun activated Sharingan first. As the two Guyu kept turning in their eyes, the eyes of several terrorists gradually blurred. After they came back to their senses, they entered the monitoring room with natural expressions as if they hadn't seen Chen Yun. The only difference from the past is that these hypnotized terrorists did not drink or eat meat, but just squatted on the side and gnawed on the dry flatbread. Using Sharingan to hypnotize ordinary people is simply a piece of cake. Chen Yun sighed, and comfortably gnawed on the oily lamb chops, and drank a sip of sheep's milk wine from time to time, and his life was even better than that of Luo Di's side. After eating the lamb chops happily, he controlled several terrorists to stand guard outside the door, and Chen Yun took a nap directly in the monitoring room. Perhaps because of the excessive energy consumed by frequent use of Sharingan, he soon fell asleep. Where am I? In a trance, Chen Yun felt as if he had entered a void, and it was so dark that he couldn't see anything clearly. When he finished looking around, he didn't know when. There was already a man wielding a hammer and lightning all over his body. Looking at the incoming lightning hammer, Chen Yun subconsciously wanted to avoid it, only to realize that he had no body. Chen Yun, who was just a mass of consciousness, couldn't dodge at all, he could only watch helplessly as the hammer pierced himself. Am I okay? After the hammer of thunder passed through his body, Chen Yun suddenly realized that he had entered the sleep prophecy again. And everything now is naturally in the prophecy in the dream. After waiting idly for a while, another huge robot appeared in the void. Saul, where are you? Loki, where are you? The robot kept running around in the void in a daze, and at the same time kept calling two names with a mechanical voice. In the voice like a repeater, Chen Yun woke up. Saul, Loki. Thor, the god of trickery. Loki. Recalling the two names that appeared in the dream, Chen Yu felt a headache. In divination, everything that happens can be called reality. For example, he found Tony Stark with the help of prophecy. But the inconvenience of this prophecy is that the predictions it makes are too vague. Thor waving a weapon at me, is he going to attack me, or is he going to fight with me? After thinking for a long time, Chen Yun could only sigh. The information given by prophecy, apart from being able to see people and things clearly, the rest is all guesswork. Forget it, since I will definitely meet these two people, maybe I will know when I meet them. Instead of thinking about the strange dream just now, Chen Yun turned his attention to the surveillance screen again. In the monitoring screen, Tony Stark is still diligently forging iron. When he saw him and Dr. Ethan sneakily moving the beaten iron away from the monitoring screen, Chen Yun knew what they were doing now. They're working on the original iron suit, the Mark I. These terrorists are really stupid. They didn't notice such a conspicuous action. After watching the blacksmithing series starring Tony Stark all afternoon, Chen Yun couldn't sit still. I don't know if there is a real lack of water, or if these terrorists are too lazy. The air in the whole room is filled with a choking smell. Unable to bear it, Chen Yun turned around and left the monitoring room, walking towards Tony's room. Tony, someone is coming. In the closed room, Tony was working hard to assemble the steel suit. Just halfway through, Ethan's nervous reminder sounded in his ear. In order to prevent terrorists from discovering his plan, Tony had to break up the parts again. As soon as the camouflage was done, the door of the room was opened. As before, Tony looked at the visitor with a displeased face. My God, it's you. After seeing Chen Yun's face clearly, Tony was so excited that he rushed towards Chen Yun like a child weighing pounds. Chen, are you here to save me? Hurry up and take me away. I can't stay in this place for a minute. Looking at Tony, who hugged his thigh tightly and even wanted to kiss him, Chen Yun warned with a look of disgust, "You'd better not do that." Pushing Tony's face covered with blood and sweat away with his hands, "If I do this again, I will disappear immediately." I was too excited. Tony smiled awkwardly, but his eyes were full of hope. "Chen, it's great to see you again. Are you really here to save us?" Compared to the excited Tony, Dr. Ethan was much calmer. He asked Chen Yun cautiously, "Where are the members of the Ten Rings gang?" The Ten Rings gang. Hearing this name, Chen Yun frowned immediately. Only then did he realize that these terrorists turned out to be old acquaintances from the Ten Rings gang. He is Chen Yun, the superpower consultant of S.H.I.E.L.D. After explaining to Dr. Ethan, Tony asked Chen Yun in a low voice, "Did you sneak in?" He has already seen that Chen Yun doesn't even know whose territory this is, and he didn't hear any fighting sounds just now, so there is a high probability that Chen Yun will not come in by force. Of course it sneaked in. Chen Yun's words immediately made Tony nervous, and his excitement subsided. What should we do? Where are the other members of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Just me. Glancing at Tony, Chen Yun sat down on the chair, and then said slowly, "I've been here a long time ago, and I'm still watching you on the monitor all day long." What? Tony's eyes widened, and he shouted in surprise, "Doesn't that mean that you already knew I was here?" "Of course, and I've seen you doing some weird stuff." After knocking on the parts on the table, Chen Yun looked at Tony with a half smile. "Asshole, you've been in the monitoring room all day, didn't you think of coming to me sooner?" Thinking of himself slamming irons to survive, while Chen Yun was leisurely watching a play, Tony couldn't get angry. He questioned angrily, "Are you just watching me live under the threat of terrorists? Isn't this still alive and kicking?" Having said that, Chen Yun stopped, and asked Tony, who had been staring at him suspiciously, "Do you still want to go out? Why do you feel like you want to stay here for 2 more days?" Of course I want to get out." After cursing, Tony immediately pulled Dr. Ethan to a corner. The two began to pack in the room, preparing to carry the things they needed to escape. But after tidying up for a long time, the two realized that there was nothing useful except a pile of broken copper and iron. Do we just rush out with bare hands? There are hundreds of terrorists outside. After searching for a long time, Tony appeared in front of Chen Yun awkwardly holding a blacksmith's hammer. As for the thin Dr. Ethan, he was silently holding a wrench. "What weapon are you carrying?" The two people holding the sharp weapon stared at each other for a while before realizing it. With the two of them alone, they are not opponents of armed terrorists at all, so Tony hurriedly asked Chen Yun, "Are there any advanced weapons from S.H.I.E.L.D.? Arms?" Chen Yun looked at the two of them suspiciously, and then took out a weapon in their expectant eyes. "The bat dart is extremely sharp. The hidden blade is extremely sharp. Science and technology flying blade. Same as above." Oh my god. Looking at this pile of things, Tony's eyes seemed to lose their light. Even if Chen Yun can fight again, with only 3 people holding these weapons, they can face hundreds of terrorists holding various weapons. Tony suddenly had the idea that it would be safer to stay here. "Let's wait, our equipment is almost finished." After considering the strength of the enemy and ourselves for a while, Tony still chose to escape from this place. But his eyes turned to the parts scattered on the table. With this set of equipment, our hope of escape will be greater. What is this? Although he already knew that this was the miraculous Mark I, Chen Yun did not choose to say, "Looks like a leg." This is a high-tech medical prosthesis. Tony, with hope reappearing in his eyes, even joked. This thing doesn't look like it's for a hospital." Glancing at the ugly piece of iron, Chen Yun said with a smile, "It's a bit like the equipment for sending people to the hospital." "Sent to the hospital?" Tony sneered twice before saying in a cold tone. "This thing will send them to hell." With Chen Yun in charge of watching out for terrorists, Tony naturally didn't have to hide it. No worries, one is a playboy genius scientist, and the other is a seasoned genius doctor and scientist. Tony Stark and Dr. Ethan began to get busy. Although they didn't get along for a long time, the sympathy between the geniuses still made the two of them have a good understanding. Whenever Tony had doubts about the design, Dr. Ethan would give inspiration in time, making the building speed increase rapidly. The two cooperated tacitly, and Chen Yun, who wanted to help, couldn't intervene at all. In less than an hour, the leg armor, which Tony called a high-tech medical prosthesis, was created. "Let's assemble the big baby." Tony wiped his sweat and said to Dr. Ethan expectantly. In a short while, with the help of Dr. Ethan, they took out the parts that had been built long ago from the discarded materials and under the bed. Soon, the steel battle armor composed of bulletproof iron, copper, magnesium alloy and some leather goods was assembled. This armor made of Jericho missile parts is enough to resist the shooting of individual light weapons at close range. The left arm is equipped with a flamethrower, and there is a small missile hidden in the right arm. Touching the built armor, Tony nodded in satisfaction. "Ethan, help." Dr. Ethan hurried forward and put this steel armor similar to medieval knight armor on Tony's body. Wow! When all the parts were worn on the body, Tony pressed the switch with excitement. As the lights of the energy device on the chest flickered, the entire armor was activated. Press the button again, and a huge airflow gushes out from the armor's feet. Immediately, the battle armor took Tony to fly to a position 1 meter above the ground. "It's pretty handsome." Looking at Tony flying up, Chen Yun nodded. Then he turned to Dr. Ethan, who was equally excited, and asked, "How long can this thing fly?" "Well, theoretically, it can fly until it runs out of fuel." Adjusting his glasses, Dr. Ethan cautiously added, "If you can't fall to your death. Hey, please save some face for our technological crystallization." Tony showed a bit of embarrassment. He controlled the battle suit to land crookedly, and shouted to Ethan in dissatisfaction, "Please, this is our invincible battle suit." After finishing speaking, Tony looked at Chen Yun and asked, "How is it?" "I just acted handsomely." "Really?" Chen Yun nodded, then turned his gaze to the deep cave, and said, "Then let us solve some troubles." "Yo-hoo!" Tony shouted excitedly, manipulating the armor and rushing out fiercely. Coming to the door, the two steel arms of the battle armor suddenly grabbed the heavy iron door. Immediately afterwards, Tony let out a roar, and tore open the iron door violently. "Ha ha ha ha, gentlemen and ladies, let's kill it." Looking at Tony, who was beginning to get carried away because of putting on the armor, Chen Yun was speechless. "That door is open." Speechlessly leading Dr. Ethan, Chen Yun followed Tony's footsteps and walked out of the cave. Just halfway through, the terrorists attracted by Tony's violent break-in of the door came to besiege. Tony drove the armor and waved his iron arm, and while hitting the enemy with a flamethrower, he quickly rushed to the entrance of the cave. But soon, the arrogant he was taught to be a man. When we arrived at a wide spot in the cave, dozens of terrorists were already waiting here with AKs in hand. A few rounds of bullets shot over, Tony was beaten back again and again, and he was shocked by the impact of the bullets and grinned. "Will it work?" Looking at Tony, who was still high-spirited just now, hiding in the cave in embarrassment and not even daring to show his head, Chen Yun asked suspiciously. "Their firepower is too strong." Tony carefully looked over his head, and was hit by the bullet and fell to the ground. "Well, then let me take the shot." As soon as the words fell, Chen Yun's figure disappeared. When he appeared again, he had already appeared behind the terrorists. The bat dart he was holding was shot in an instant, causing a splash of blood. The hidden blade in his hand pierced the throats of several terrorists in succession. "Who is this fool?" Seeing Chen Yun appearing suddenly, the surviving terrorists froze for a moment, and one of them who reacted the fastest immediately picked up his submachine gun and shot towards Chen Yun. But he could only shoot an afterimage. The real Chen Yun had already stood behind him. "Are you looking for me?" When the wrist was flipped, the hidden blade turned into a silver-white dagger, stabbed the terrorist's neck fiercely, and nailed him to the wall. In an instant, all the terrorists fell at Chen Yun's feet. Such a result shocked Tony and Dr. Ethan, who were hiding nearby. "Wow, that's really cool." Seeing Chen Yun killing all the terrorists like chopping melons and vegetables, Tony couldn't help but widen his eyes and praised, "Chen, you are so strong." Because of the powerful Chen Yun, the terrorists did not dare to enter the cave again, and they encountered no obstacles along the way. However, due to Tony's heavy armor, the three of Chen Yun still walked for 5 or 6 minutes to reach the entrance of the cave. Before leaving the cave, Chen Yun realized that something was wrong. "Incline 42 degrees, there's a Gatling." Chen Yun, who had been driving Sharingan, spotted the enemy's weapon in an instant. He pointed in that direction and said, "Use your missile to destroy it." "Yes, my Batman." Tony raised a non-standard military salute, laughed and raised the right arm of the battle armor. Under Chen Yun's watchful eye, a tiny red missile shot out from the armor, spun rapidly for a few seconds, and then landed on a pile of tents marked with ammunition depots. My God! Looking at the missiles falling on the ammunition depot, Tony's face turned green immediately. If the ammunition depot explodes, they will definitely not be spared. Pull me, let's run. Tony immediately grabbed Dr. Ethan beside him, and tried to fly Chen Yun and Dr. Ethan into the sky. But when he was looking for Chen Yun, he suddenly found that Chen Yun had been watching him from the sky. Before he had time to complain, Tony pulled Dr. Ethan, fully activated the foot injectors, and the steel suit flew towards the sky at high speed. Rao was Tony's quick reaction, but he was still a step slower, not long after they had just taken off. Boom! A huge explosion came from below, and Tony felt that the whole sky seemed to tremble. The whole steel battle suit also seemed to lose control, and fell down suddenly, smashing a huge hole in the ground. At the bottom of the pit, Tony and Dr. Ethan had been knocked to pieces, their heads were buzzing, and their eyes were staring. If it wasn't for the armor to withstand the impact, the two of them would have been smashed into flesh. In a trance, Tony saw Chen Yun sliding down from the sky on a transparent slide. "Why don't you take us with you? Your conscience won't hurt. Ethan, quickly help me take down this thing." Looking at the starry night sky above his head, Tony Stark felt the importance of freedom for the first time in his life. With the help of Dr. Ethan, Tony took off his heavy armor. Although this steel armor that helped everyone escape from the sky only played for a short 10 minutes, it was completely scrapped after encountering a gun battle and falling. Looking at Tony, who was still celebrating happily, Chen Yun took out the communicator. "Tony Stark has been rescued. Here are the coordinates, send someone to pick them up." "What?" Colonel Roddy, who was on the opposite side of the communicator, was obviously taken aback by the news. Chen Yun, who didn't even have a car, rescued Tony so quickly. And he was single-handedly rescued from terrorists. Is Tony okay? Just as Luo Di was about to ask, he heard the beeping sound from the communicator. Shield. Cursed. Roddy didn't dare to neglect, and hurriedly ordered his men to prepare a helicopter to rescue people. "Colonel, this coordinate is very far away. Our helicopter needs to fly for hours." "What? I've already told Roddy, he will come to pick you up." After hanging up the communicator, Chen Yun pointed to a sand dune and said to Tony, "That's it, I gave them the coordinates." "Okay, then let's go over and wait." Tony smiled and nodded, and warmly invited Chen Yun to go with him. "No, I'm going home to eat and take a shower by the way." Chen Yun yawned, and then, under the disbelieving eyes of Tony and Dr. Ethan, he summoned a door. Turning the doorknob, the opposite side of the door changed from yellow sand to Chen Yun's rental house. "See you." Standing on the door frame, Chen Yun waved goodbye to the shocked Tony and Dr. Ethan, and then walked in. "Wait for me." After reacting, Tony's expression changed drastically, and he ran towards the door while rolling and crawling, "Take me and Ethan together." But when Tony ran to the door, all he could touch was a puff of smoke. This turn of events made Tony feel depressed internally. He complained to Dr. Ethan, "Since Chen has this ability, why didn't he just take us away in the cave?" "I remember, it seems that you led the charge, right?" Dr. Ethan adjusted his glasses, and added rigorously. Forehead. Tony froze. "That fool, forget it. Chen Yun is, after all, the superpower consultant of S.H.I.E.L.D. Tony sighed, and explained to Dr. Ethan, "There are ordinary people in S.H.I.E.L.D., but he is special. Hey, I wanted him to be my bodyguard before. Thinking about it now, how could someone like him be short of money?" While chatting, Tony and Dr. Ethan climbed up the sand dunes. By the time they climbed to the top of the dune, the two of them were already sweating from exhaustion. Because they didn't bring any water or food, the two could only stare at each other. "If I go back, I want to eat lamb chops the most. Smelling the smell of roast sheep on those terrorists all day long, but we can only eat bread." Thinking of the 2 days of being imprisoned, Tony felt like a lifetime away. "So do I." After chatting for a while, the two of them couldn't bear the exhaustion anymore, and they all lay down on the ground. The two of them just lay quietly on the sand, not bothering to say a word. But soon, the desert taught them how to be human. The temperature difference between day and night in the desert is huge, especially at night when the wind is dry and cold. After staying for 5 or 6 hours, the two who hadn't eaten or drank water were a little bit overwhelmed. Touching his chapped lips, Tony felt powerless all over. The same was true for Dr. Ethan next to him. He was shivering from the cold because of his thin clothes. At this scene, Tony couldn't help cursing, "So cold. I really want to drink water." Just when the two were almost desperate, a voice suddenly came from a distance. The two jumped up almost at the same time, and turned their heads to look in the direction of the sound. "Hi, two." A wooden door appeared quietly behind the two of them, and Chen Yun, who was full of smiles, leaned against the door frame, holding a bag in his hand. "It's a real pleasure to see you two again." Looking at the distressed appearance of the two, Chen Yun smiled even more happily. "It shows the hamburger watermelon juice combo that I just bought from Kenda Chicken in the bag." Chen Yun said to the two, "The watermelon juice is $500 million, and the hamburger is $3,000 million. Think about it, in this barren desert, drinking sweet watermelon juice and eating juicy burgers. Stop talking, I'll offer $1 million. Tony stared greedily at the hamburger and watermelon juice, and said weakly, "I want them all." Hearing that Tony was willing to spend $1 million to buy this pile of junk food, Chen Yun smiled. "Well, I want to thank you for your generosity. I will give you another stack of tissues as a friendly gift." After shaking the bag in front of the weak Tony, Chen Yun stretched out his hand again. "How do I pay the bill?" Quote? Tony glanced at Chen Yun's hand, then at his tattered clothes, and said speechlessly, "Do you think I look like a rich man? Back to New York, I'll arrange for someone to send you a check right away. Then, please use it slowly." After speaking, Chen Yun handed the bag to Tony, then summoned a new wooden door, and disappeared into the desert again. "Is this what you said you didn't lack money?" Dr. Ethan held up his glasses and stared at the direction where Chen Yun disappeared speechlessly. "His superpower makes money really fast." Quote. Tony couldn't say anything anymore. He felt like he was being taken advantage of now. "The fast food worth tens of dollars cost me a total $1 million. Silently, he gave half of the food to Dr. Ethan, and the two sat cross-legged on the desert. "Lamb chops, hee." Thinking about the lamb chops he still wanted to eat before, Tony smiled wryly and shook his head. But just as the two of them unpacked the hamburger and were about to fill their stomachs, a helicopter flew over from a distance. Huge propellers rolled up countless sands. Bah, bah. The two people who just opened their mouths were immediately covered in sand. "Who is so vicious? Oh, oh." Tony's cursing got stuck in an instant. The helicopter was getting closer and closer. Tony and Dr. Ethan finally saw the pilot clearly. Colonel Roddy. The helicopter stopped in front of them, and Roddy opened the hatch. "Why are you two alone? Where's Chen Yun?" While talking, Roddy cast his eyes on Tony and the two. Looking at the keji burger and watermelon juice in the hands of Tony and Dr. Ethan, Roddy's face was full of doubts. "Well, what are you guys?" Looking at Tony and Dr. Ethan, Colonel Roddy felt that his brain was not enough. Although he didn't know Dr. Ethan, he knew the food in his hand. Can fight chicken. In this uninhabited desert, they still have this kind of food. "If there is no food on the plane, you owe me $1 million. Rolling his eyes, Tony reluctantly threw away the food covered in sand. Glancing at Roddy indifferently, Tony ignored him and got on the helicopter directly. 100 million. What? Just because of the junk food? Looking at Tony in surprise, Roddy couldn't believe his ears. Are you out of your mind? Tony ignored him and closed the hatch directly. Well, this is an internal price. Dr. Ethan lifted his glasses, and said to Roddy rigorously, you'd better pray that there is food on the plane. Quote. You are all crazy. Shaking his head, Roddy froze on the spot in a daze. You owe me an apology. What? Chen Yun, who was lying on the sofa with Jaeyu, looked at the furious Zhao Shiren inexplicably. You again. Zhao Shiren's cheeks were slightly red, and he gave Chen Yun a hard look. You must admit it. Smack me, ass thing. Ah, the corner of Chen Yun's mouth twitched. he suddenly thought of what happened last night. I seem to have pressed her on the dining table, and the feel seems to be quite good, especially the elastic feeling. What are you thinking? Looking at Chen Yun's dreamy expression, Zhao Shiren puffed up with his hands on his hips. How dare you not admit it? No, I definitely don't. Chen Yun quickly shook his head. Even if there is a grievance between us, it is in the past tense. As he said that, Chen Yun still smirked and looked at Zhao Shiren's upturned part. Now you mention it again, do you still want to be beaten again? Hearing Chen Yun's words, Zhao Shiren immediately covered something, and thought with a flushed face, what a stinking hooligan, how does he know what I'm thinking? Humph. Zhao Shiren snorted coldly, turned around and walked out, saying as he walked, I don't want to talk to you, you pervert. Chen Yun shrugged his shoulders, got up and walked over. Hey, I haven't eaten yet. Zhao Shiren turned his head and glared at Chen Yun, just eat and eat. Just about to say more, but seeing Chen Yun rubbing his belly, Zhao Shiren's heart softened, and the words he was about to blurt changed accordingly. Wait. Watching Zhao Shiren enter the kitchen, Chen Yun chuckled, then returned to the sofa and continued to lie down with Jie Yu. In less than 2 minutes, Zhao Shiren came out with fried pork and steamed rice. After putting down the bowls and chopsticks, she gave Chen Yun a white look. Eat. Looking at the dishes on the table, Chen Yun was overjoyed. Zhao Shiren must have prepared the dishes in such a short time. The appearance is good, and I have made progress recently. After finishing speaking, Chen Yun took a bite of the fried pork, and the taste had really improved a lot. Seeing Zhao Shiren holding the bowl and chopsticks ready to serve the meal, Chen Yun couldn't help teasing, are you going to feed me yourself? Hearing Chen Yun's teasing voice, Zhao Shiren glared at Chen Yun with a blushing face, it's a good idea. Zhao Shiren scooped up some rice with a spoon and put it in Chen Yun's bowl. Seeing this scene, Chen Yun couldn't help laughing. Just as he was about to joke a few more words, he suddenly felt a sense of powerlessness all over his body. Chen Yun's body turned red in an instant, and he was sweating all over. The hand holding the table was also gradually loosening, and it was about to stagger and fall to the ground. Chen Yun, what's wrong with you? Zhao Shiren hurried to Chen Yun's side, supported him who was almost unsteady, and asked with concern, what's wrong? Chen Yun only felt that his whole body was hot, and beads of sweat dripped down from his forehead, his lips trembling slightly. Is this poisoned? Poisoned. Zhao Shiren was stunned for a second, then exclaimed, how is it possible, I ate it too. At this moment, Chen Yun had no way to explain it. He felt as if he had entered a strange state. This state is very mysterious, as if he is in an illusory space. But what was strange was that he was clearly in Zhao Shiren's arms again. Teleport. After discovering this situation, Chen Yun decisively used the teleportation ability. But what surprised him was that his spatial ability disappeared. And through this failure, he also knew the recovery time of the ability, 2 hours. How is this going? Confused, Chen Yun looked around. The illusory space and Zhao Shiren's face were constantly intertwined. When his eyes shifted to Zhao Shiren's rosy lips, a picture suddenly flashed in Chen Yun's mind. Sleep prophecy. In the dream last night, besides Tony Stark, he also dreamed of a scene. And in that dream, he also lost his spatial ability. The reason is that he kissed a foreign woman. Chen Yun suddenly understood. He exhausted his strength, and then used the time traveler's pocket watch. When the screen changed, Chen Yun returned to 5 minutes ago. You owe me an apology. Looking at the furious Zhao Shiren, this time, Chen Yun decisively chose to confess directly, sorry. Then, Chen Yun ignored Zhao Shiren who was astonished, and quickly checked his body. Only then did he discover that not only his body had fully recovered, but even his spatial ability had also recovered. I'm sorry, I dare to do it next time. Relieved, Chen Yun cast his eyes on Zhao Shiren again, and said with a teasing smile, you don't have a tail on your butt, do you? Tail. Zhao Shiren first touched his back in confusion, and then came to his senses. Are you sick? She blushed and gave Chen Yun a look. I do not believe. Chen Yun rubbed his hands, and leaned forward with a smirk. Unless you let me touch it. Ah, rogue. Zhao Shiren screamed, but he didn't make any struggle at all, instead he closed his eyes resignedly. Well, you're not an alien, are you? To Zhao Shiren's surprise, the strange hand in his imagination never touched him. She quietly opened her eyes, but only saw Chen Yun, who was amazed at her with a gossiping face. Seeing her like this, Chen Yun couldn't help laughing. You should be half an alien. In other words, you are a stranger. Chen Yun folded his hands on his chest, looked at Zhao Shiren with sizing eyes, and said in a firm tone, it's just that you haven't awakened your superpower yet. Is it? Looking at the straight steel man in front of him, Zhao Shiren sneered a few times, and suddenly stepped on Chen Yun's foot hard with his right foot. She gritted her teeth and looked at Chen Yun. My superpower is to flatten you. Quote. Am I really a stranger? Knowing the news from Chen Yun suddenly, Zhao Shiren didn't recover for a long time. With a surprised expression on her delicate face, she sat down on the sofa with confused eyes. Chen Yun, on the other hand, was thinking with a slight frown. Chen Yun has confirmed that Zhao Shiren's alien identity is almost inseparable. But to be really sure, you still need to go to S.H.I.E.L.D. for a blood test. I've heard of Inhumans from the Rising Tide organization before, but I don't have any special feelings. Looking at Chen Yun suspiciously, Zhao Shiren asked a little strangely, could it be that my computer ability is a supernatural power? That's just your talent, not a supernatural power. Chen Yun shook his head and explained with a smile, you haven't awakened yet. If you do, only then will you become a real alien. After a pause, Chen Yun added, there is your file in S.H.I.E.L.D., but even there is no information about your parents. It's not normal. Why isn't it normal? Zhao Shiren blinked his big eyes a few times, and said curiously, you don't have parents either. I didn't say I was normal. Chen Yun shrugged and said, the S.H.I.E.L.D. database collects almost all the information on Earth. If there is none, it can only mean that it was covered up. Okay, let's take a good rest. I'll take you to the S.H.I.E.L.D. for an inspection tomorrow. After finishing speaking, Chen Yun yawned and returned to his room pretending to go to sleep. He couldn't let Zhao Shiren know about it before he solved the weakness of getting sick from kissing with strangers. This idiot. Looking at the dishes that had been prepared in the kitchen, Zhao Shiren frowned and muttered, obviously all the ingredients are prepared, but that idiot is not hungry. It's not good to eat it now. If you don't eat it, it will go bad again. She hesitated for a moment, and finally sighed softly, and put all the cut ingredients into the refrigerator. Back in the room, Chen Yun checked the time. It was not yet 12 o'clock. He turned on the computer, ready to play games for a while. After opening the offline city and the warriors, Chen Yun logged into the Brave Continent. But less than 10 minutes after going online, Chen Yun felt a little boring. The whole body is covered with +15 divine attire, which made Chen Yun lose the previous challenge when painting pictures. No matter how difficult the dungeon is, it can't stop the crushing of equipment. After swiping a few pictures like opening a cheat, Chen Yun sighed and turned off the game directly. The character is too strong, and it's not fun. While thinking about it, the bored Chen Yun opened the webpage, ready to browse the latest news. But as soon as I opened the familiar website, an advertisement popped up inside. Do you want to be a hero? Do you want to be a superhero? Come be the next Batman. What is this? Looking at the title, Chen Yun was confused. Although it is not a new term, this advertisement is too old-fashioned. Moreover, this so-called Batman can't be me, right? Chen Yun rubbed his nose and continued to browse the webpage curiously. When he saw the photo of himself at Tencent headquarters, he suddenly realized. Oh, it's you. After complaining, Chen Yun directly scrolled the webpage to the bottom, and sure enough, he saw a line of small characters at the bottom. Produced by Tencent, creating happiness with heart. What about the advertising fee? Ma Wadong, you didn't pay the advertising fee. Chen Yun rolled his eyes, and then downloaded the game that was born early because of himself. League of Legends. After the game was installed, Chen Yun finally lifted his spirits. This game I had played before time travel had been with Chen Yun for a long time. Playing it again now still makes Chen Yun a little excited. As soon as he entered the game, Chen Yun chose his favorite hero. The Promise Sword Master, Master Yi. It's better to stick to the old version. There are many heroes who abuse food. Relying on the understanding of the leading version of the game, and the proficiency of playing for several years, Chen Yun controlled Master Yi, fighting from the wild to the lane, and then back to the jungle from the lane. At the end of the game, his game experience was full, and his data even cut down a luxurious double-double. The 21st of February 11. Cool. Excited to abuse Xiaomengxin, Chen Yun immediately prepared to start the next game. But before he clicked the button to start matching, the phone on the table suddenly rang. Chen, you will never guess what I found. As soon as it was connected, Peter's rap began. I met a weirdo with scales all over his body. Wow, he looks so strange. He looks like a lizard. I call him Lizard Man. Wait, you said you met a lizard man? After listening to Peter's description, Chen Yun said speechlessly, then, good luck to you. Chen, won't you come with me? Don't you wonder what a lizard man looks like? Sorry, I'm really not curious. Smiling, Chen Yun directly turned off the phone, then picked up the mouse, ready to start the next round of the game. As for the lizard man, it's just an ordinary little Kurami, let's leave it to his old enemy Spider-Man. But what Chen Yun didn't expect was that when he entered the game, the phone rang again. Once connected, it was still Peter's rap. Come with me, Chen. We are partners. Batman, Spider-Man, listen to the name. We are the underground heroes of New York. No, I'm still SHIELD's psychic advisor. Chen Yun complained in his heart, but there was a smile on the corner of his mouth, and he said in a solemn tone, I have other tasks now, code name, Alliance. Alliance. Sure enough, Chen Yunshan's mysterious words got Peter hooked. Even across the phone, Chen Yun could hear the surprise in Peter's tone. That's cool. What kind of powerful organization is this? Oh, I see. Is this a secret? I will definitely keep this secret. Chen, you are my idol. You are so cool. Then I hang up. I won't bother you anymore. Goodbye. Seeing that Peter had been fooled and couldn't find Bei, Chen Yun nodded in satisfaction and continued his alliance journey. Cool. The killings one after another on the screen made Chen Yun feel a different kind of pleasure. Time is also spent quickly in the happy game time. It's already 1 o'clock. After another round of the game was over, Chen Yun belatedly realized that the night was already dark. Turning off the computer, Chen Yun rubbed his hands together, and began to extract today's new abilities with anticipation. Sign in. Ding. Sign in successfully. Congratulations to the host for getting today's ability. Wugu Immortal Physique. Wugu Immortal Physique. Seeing this name, Chen Yun couldn't help but frown. What? After he read the introduction of the ability, Chen Yun's eyes lit up immediately. This is a power from another universe. Wugu Immortal Physique, and even the meaning of clean Wugu. With this kind of physique, it is enough not to touch anything, and everything can be avoided. In this body, all dharmas are empty, there is no self, there is no life, and there is no sentient being. It can be said that Bodhi is not a tree at all. Where can dust be aroused? After reading the introduction of the ability, Chen Yun couldn't help but swear. This ability is really too powerful. This means that no matter what kind of spell it is, if it is contaminated with this innocent breath, it will basically be abolished. The key is, Wugu Immortal Physique can also be immune to most negative states, such as curses, poisons, etc. Such a sky-defying skill is simply a blast. But excitement is nothing but excitement, but there is still one thing before Chen Yun, how to use this Wugu Immortal Physique. Use Wugu Immortal Physique. Just after tentatively activating the ability, Chen Yun felt a sense of exhaustion flooding his body. After struggling to get on the bed, Chen Yun suddenly fell down and fell asleep lying on the bed. The next morning, when Chen Yun woke up, he immediately felt refreshed. The fatigue of last night seemed to be swept away, and there was no discomfort like sleeping on the stomach all night. When he came under the bed, Chen Yun only felt that his body was so light that he couldn't even hear the sound of his feet stepping on the floor. After doing a few random movements, he found himself becoming lighter and lighter, and his speed was astonishingly fast. Feeling the body that is as light as a flying swallow, Chen Yun turned over from the window to the balcony in a flash. Jumping out of the window, and jumping back from the window, a series of actions are chic and comfortable, as if shooting a movie. After playing back and forth several times, Chen Yun couldn't help but jumped up. Whoosh! When Chen Yun jumped up with all his strength, he flew into the sky like an arrow off the string, directly from the balcony on the 3rd floor to the rooftop on the 7th floor. His head knocked a big hole out of the balcony on the entire 4th floor. After standing still in shock, Chen Yun quickly touched his head. Only then did he realize that he was unscathed. It can do it, it's worthy of the immortal physique. After a word of praise, Chen Yun carefully looked down. I saw that the originally delicate and elegant balcony had become dilapidated and a mess. Fortunately, it's morning, otherwise it would be a disaster if someone finds out. Is this the effect brought by Wugu immortal physique? What? Chen Yun punched out suddenly, and there was a sharp whistling in the air, and the trash can on the roof was smashed to the ground by his punch. Looking at the fist marks on the trash can, Chen Yun was stunned for a moment. Huh. Originally, his skills were considered pretty good, but now Chen Yun has a feeling that his current skills seem to be comparable to the legendary martial arts masters. Excited, Chen Yun immediately kicked his fists on the roof, and immediately, everything on the roof suffered. Whether it was the central air conditioner made of steel, the water storage tank, or the firebox and trash can, they were all destroyed by Chen Yun. Because the air conditioner in the house was out of function and the damaged balcony was found, Chen Yun had already heard the curses of the users. It seems to be a bit too much. Thinking of the scene of the landlord and tenants being furious, Chen Yun quickly activated the time traveler's pocket watch. There was a trance in front of my eyes, and the time reverted back to 5 minutes ago. Chen Yun also returned to his bed. Standing up from the bed, a smile appeared on Chen Yun's face. Chen Yun, who had calmed down, carefully observed the changes in himself. Aside from his increased physical fitness and strength, the most notable feature is his skin. Chen Yun was pleasantly surprised to find that his skin was spotless, as if it had really been washed clean. It seems that I don't need to take a shower in the future. Feeling the smooth and new skin, Chen Yun was ecstatic in his heart. Looking at the figure again, the 8-pack abs and mermaid line are all arranged. The originally thin figure instantly became more stylish. And when Chen Yun found the mirror, he was even more shocked. I saw that the cheeks that were originally ordinary have now become white and flawless, as if they were carved out of beautiful jade. Chen Yun was a little silly. He knew that he was quite handsome, but he didn't expect to be so handsome now. If he stood on the street now, it would probably cause a sensation. I don't know if the immortal body can resist the side effects. Suddenly, a thought flashed in Chen Yun's mind. He ran to Zhao Shiren's room without thinking about it. Shiren, are you awake? Quickly let me kiss you. Hurry up. Hearing Chen Yun's voice, the corners of Zhao Shiren's mouth twitched a few times when he just got up, and he was stunned. Kiss. Isn't Chen Yun a straight man of steel? Why did you suddenly change? Rogue. Zhao Shiren yelled through the door. Her pretty face immediately turned red, and she hummed softly, "Get out." Coughing in embarrassment, Chen Yun knocked on the door a few more times deliberately. Based on what he knew about Zhao Shiren, as long as he persisted, Zhao Shiren would definitely open the door. But before Chen Yun stretched out his hand to knock on the door, he suddenly remembered something. By the way, those dishes. Chen Yun remembered the fried pork with chili that caused his reaction last night. Because Zhao Shiren ate the cold dish in advance, that's why I. Thinking of this, Chen Yun withdrew his hand from knocking on the door. No need, I'll go eat first. After speaking, Chen Yun immediately ran to the refrigerator again. Open the refrigerator. In addition to the chopped peppers and meat, there are also several cold dishes wrapped in plastic wrap. Which dish is it? Looking at the cabinet full of dishes, Chen Yun frowned, feeling a little confused for a moment. It doesn't matter, it's all in the refrigerator anyway, so just try it. After taking out all the dishes, Chen Yun ate all the cold dishes with chopsticks. It's okay, it's still okay. After tasting all the dishes, Chen Yun was pleasantly surprised. There is no abnormality in his body, he is already immune to the DNA of aliens. This discovery made Chen Yun ecstatic. Wugu immortal physique is really too powerful. Chen Yun, did you take the wrong medicine today? Shyly hiding under the quilt, Zhao Shiren didn't wait for Chen Yun to continue speaking for a long time. She walked out of the room suspiciously, saw Chen Yun sitting in the living room like a madman, and immediately glared at Chen Yun. You stupid. The moment Zhao Shiren saw Chen Yun, she couldn't speak anymore. Clap. Sound. The pillow in Zhao Shiren's hand fell to the ground. Chapter 51. Chen Yun's big change directly stunned Zhao Shiren. That more handsome face and tall and straight figure almost didn't make Zhao Shiren's mouth water. She didn't expect that Chen Yun would become so handsome after just one night of absence. You. Zhao Shiren stared blankly. Seeing Chen Yun's current appearance, Zhao Shiren blushed, and involuntarily pouted her little mouth. Hurry up, aren't you going to do some experiments? Bring it on, I can die for science. Zhao Shiren's pretty face was full of determination, as if she really wanted to dedicate her life to science. I won't refuse again in the future. What the hell? Zhao Shiren's gesture made Chen Yun speechless, and he couldn't help but said, thank you for your dedication, but the experiment is over. Besides, men and women can't kiss each other. Ah, Zhao Shiren's eyes widened, showing surprise. It's over. How is it possible? Didn't you want to? Zhao Shiren's voice dropped suddenly, humming like a mosquito. Do you want to kiss? Okay. Hearing her words, Chen Yun looked at Zhao Shiren dumbfounded. I think it's better for you to take a bath first and calm down. It's getting late, I'll go to Shield to help you check later. Then, shall we wash together? After speaking, Zhao Shiren quickly lowered her head, her face was completely red. Are you sure? Chen Yun asked with a smirk. I'm afraid I won't be able to control myself. Bah, smelly fool. Zhao Shiren scolded coquettishly. I'm just talking casually. She turned her head, fixed her eyes on Chen Yun, and suddenly approached his ear and shouted loudly, Big pig's hoof. Humph. Zhao Shiren snorted coldly, but her performance was not as indifferent as before. After turning around, Zhao Shiren quickly rushed into the bathroom, and the moment the door was closed, she couldn't help turning her head and sneaking a few glances. This time, Zhao Shiren took a full bath for more than an hour, even to the point where there was no more hot water. In the end, under Chen Yun's constant urging, Zhao Shiren came out of the bathroom blushing. Looking suspiciously at Zhao Shiren, who ran back to the room with his head down, Chen Yun also went in and took a shower. Although there was no hot water, but with the Wugu immortal physique, Chen Yun was already invulnerable to cold and heat, let alone cold water. He even felt that even if he jumped into the icy water in Siberia, nothing would happen. While taking a shower, Chen Yun turned on the communicator. Gemma, are you in Shield? I need your help. Chen Yun was naturally looking for an old acquaintance, the experimenter Gemma Simmons. With Gemma, an experimenter who is very familiar with Inhumans, she will definitely be able to tell whether Zhao Shiren has Inhuman genes. Chen, what's the matter with you? I'm in the lab at headquarters with Fitz. Soon, Gemma's voice came from the communicator. I want to ask you to help with an experiment. As for the specific situation, let's wait until later. Hearing that Gemma is not in the field but in the laboratory, Chen Yun is relieved. After simply taking a shower, Chen Yun walked out of the bathroom. After another half an hour of boring waiting on the sofa, Zhao Shiren, whose face was still rosy, came out of the room slowly. When she saw Chen Yun sitting in the living room, her cheeks were as red as a ripe apple. Rosheng arbitrary door. Seeing that Zhao Shiren finally came out, Chen Yun quickly activated his ability. Since his teleportation ability, he has ditched vehicles that cost money. Not for saving money, mainly for energy saving and environmental protection. Chen Yun directly pulled Zhao Shiren's slender hand, who was still in a daze. Through the created door, you came directly to the laboratory of Shield. Wow, this ability is really cool. The moment they saw the door, Gemma and Fitz knew that it was Chen Yun. Hi Chen. But when Chen Yun came out of the door, Fitz and Gemma were just about to say hello. The test tube in their hands fell to the ground with a click, and a shocked expression appeared on their faces at the same time. My God, how did you become so handsome? Fitz's eyeballs almost popped out, and his mouth was so wide that he almost bit off his own tongue. As for Gemma, it was even more exaggerated. She walked up to Chen Yun involuntarily, and suddenly reached out to touch Chen Yun's face. Wow, it's really smooth. Seeing Gemma's exaggerated actions, Chen Yun felt a chill in his heart. No matter how you look at it, this kind of behavior is only done by female hooligans, right? But what surprised him even more was that Gemma's hand was slowly descending. Ahem, this time we are here to conduct an experiment. Chen Yun hurriedly coughed a few times to remind him. Aren't you here for an experiment? Gemma gave Chen Yun a blank look, and even squeezed Chen Yun's arm. Chen Yun, who was taken advantage of, suddenly had black lines all over his head. It's not that I want to do the experiment. She needs it. While speaking, Chen Yun hurriedly retreated a few steps. While escaping from Zhenma's clutches, he also revealed Zhao Shiren behind him. Oh, Who is she? Only then did Gemma and Fitz realize that there was another person in the laboratory, and they were stunned. After waiting for half a minute, seeing that everyone had come to their senses, Chen Yun said, "The purpose of our visit this time is... So, you suspect that she is a foreigner?" After listening to Chen Yun's narration, Gemma reluctantly looked at Chen Yun again, then folded her arms and resumed her demeanor as a shield experimenter. Gemma looked Zhao Shiren up and down, but suddenly asked Chen Yun curiously, "Our instruments can't detect aliens from the outside, how do you know?" Just as Chen Yun wanted to speak, he suddenly got stuck. He suddenly realized that it couldn't be said that he discovered it because he ate Zhao Shiren's saliva, right? Well, maybe it's intuition. After thinking for a long time, Chen Yun came up with the reason. Regardless of whether Gemma believed it or not, Chen Yun hurriedly asked, "Is there any way to tell the difference?" "The easiest way is to draw blood." Taking out a needle and walking to Zhao Shiren's side, Gemma explained while drawing blood, "If this girl is a foreigner, then there must be a foreigner's gene in her blood." Putting the drawn blood into an instrument, Gemma operated the instrument and began to analyze the blood. Soon, a report was printed out from the printer. "She is indeed a stranger." Holding the report in hand, Gemma frowned, "And her alien genes are very pure. Without special circumstances, it is impossible for her to awaken normally." "Can't wake up normally?" Chen Yun looked at Gemma and asked suspiciously, "Is it so difficult to awaken a foreigner?" Maybe, you can look at this." Gemma handed over a file, and then spread her hands. "Shield has been studying aliens for decades. That's all the information we've got." Taking the file in his hand, Chen Yun read it carefully. After a long time, he put down the materials and sighed. Gemma is right. After decades of secret research on Inhumans, Shield has already figured out how to awaken Inhumans. In addition to those who are awakened at birth, there are 2 ways for aliens to awaken after tomorrow. Classified by Shield as natural awakening and self-awakening. Needless to say, self-awakening, the awakening process is very similar to the Sharingan obtained by Chen Yun. They are all methods of awakening in the underworld. They must be awakened after the death of their relatives, or when they are greatly stimulated, or even between life and death. This way of awakening can't be said to be a narrow escape, it can only be said to be walking a tightrope on a cliff. A little carelessness, not to mention awakening, it's not bad if you don't die. Even if it is a fluke, it is more likely to become a lunatic. So, except for those born awakened, most of them are not mentally normal. Thinking of the various alien experiments in S.H.I.E.L.D., which were basically done on corpses, Chen Yun finally understood. Thinking of this, Chen Yun resolutely gave up on self-awakening, and turned his gaze to Gemma. The second way of awakening is natural awakening, which requires an item called Terrigen crystal, and this is also the most orthodox way of awakening used in Kree experiments. "Don't look at me, I want to study it too." Gemma shrugged and said helplessly, "But this is not available in S.H.I.E.L.D. Realizing that none of the awakening methods would work, Chen Yun glanced at Zhao Shiren. "It doesn't matter, does it?" Zhao Shiren was quite calm. She shook her head with a smile and said, "It's good to be an ordinary person. Besides, I'm not an ordinary person." After learning his identity, Zhao Shiren breathed a sigh of relief. Since there are alien genes in her body, her parents must not be simple. That way, it will be easier to find. "I'm the best hacker in the world. This is my ability." Clenching his fist excitedly, Zhao Shiren said firmly. "Tony Stark, what the hell are you going to do? Why did you close the group's weapons department as soon as you came back?" Marbury, California. In a luxurious villa built on a cliff, there were ear-piercing quarrels. "Why don't I know? I have to explain to you now." Obadi, Tony Stark, who is making a new generation of micronuclear reactors, said to the video in front of him unhappily. On the video screen, it was an older white man with a bald head. "Our stock has plummeted all the way. It's more than half." The white man named Obade said with a grim expression, "You are fully responsible for this incident. It's because of you, etc., etc." Glancing at Obade impatiently, Tony put his hand on his mouth and made a gesture of shutting up. "Obade, I will send you an email about this issue later." "What? You need to?" Looking at the hung-up video call, Obadiah threw the tablet out angrily. "This fool." Obadiah's eyes were bloodshot, and his eyes were red, like an extremely angry beast. The entire Stark group, from Howard Stark to Tony Stark, everyone only remembers these two Starks, but what about the others? Does anyone remember the hard work he, the vice president of the group, put in? Follow the Stark family and diligently help them run the weapons development department for so many years. They turned it off as soon as they said it. Didn't think about him at all. Asshole, asshole, in the eyes of your Stark family, am I just an ass wiper? Feeling neglected, Obadiah hated Tony Stark, and a crazy idea popped into his head. You'll regret it, Tony Stark. God, I finally found you. Pepper Potts searched for a long time before finding Tony at the Malibu villa. She crossed her arms and said with a concerned face, "The company has become a mess, and you are still at home." "Hi, Pepper." Seeing his beautiful secretary, Tony's face immediately changed. He was terrified of this little Pepper. But because the experiment at hand has reached the most critical moment, Tony can only greet him with a bitter face. Also because of distraction, the miniature nuclear reactor in his hand immediately began to emit a dazzling light, and a dangerous atmosphere immediately filled the entire villa. "Pepper, hurry up and help." Seeing this phenomenon, Tony was taken aback. If this device gets out of control, let alone a human being, the whole villa will go to heaven. Pepper was confused and helped Tony install the device. Before he could ask what the hell it was, Jarvis, the smart butler of the villa, suddenly spoke in an electronic voice. "Mr. Stark, you have a call. The caller's name is Boss." Upon hearing this name, Tony, who had just breathed a sigh of relief, connected the phone immediately before he had time to catch his breath. "Boss, I miss you to death." As soon as the phone was connected, Tony showed a flattering expression on his face. What? Pepper next to him was stunned. She had never seen Tony like this. "Well, I saw on the news that your stock has fallen sharply. Do you have any money for me?" On the other end of the phone, Chen Yun's voice came out. "No problem at all." After listening to Chen Yun's question, Tony responded with a smile, but he quickly explained with a tangled expression, "There is another matter. The bank's transfer system can't transfer that much money. Why don't I send it to you directly? Let me go, give me an address." "Well, the address is at." After hanging up the phone, Tony was very excited when he knew that Chen Yun was coming. He is extremely grateful to Chen Yun, the benefactor who saved his life from the terrorists. He glanced carefully at Pepper, as happy here. Immediately asked him to date the group's cover girl for the past 2 months. No, arrange the twins in March together. Pepper, with a frosty face, spat, "Happy's dead." "Don't be kidding, Happy called me this morning." "Pepper, why don't you go on a date?" What's the date?" Chen Yun looked at Tony inexplicably, and walked out from a door. "Of course, you went to the cold country." Looking at the changed Chen Yun, Tony couldn't help but widen his eyes. It's too late for anyone to make arrangements now. Glancing at the handsome Chen Yun, Pepper suddenly smiled, "Such a handsome little guy. Why don't you do it yourself?" "What? No, absolutely not." Tony refused while looking at Chen Yun. Seeing the more handsome Chen Yun, Tony Stark quickly stood up straight, trying to show his masculinity beside Chen Yun. Pepper, help." After standing for a while, Tony finally gave up this unrealistic idea, turned his head and asked Pepper next to him for help. What can I do for you?" Pepper looked at Tony in disgust. "Pimp me? Impossible. I'm the boss. You have to listen to me." Tony, who was a little bit embarrassed, insisted, "This is an order." "Order? Although you are the boss, you can't control my private life. I need to rest, take time off." Rolling his eyes, Pepper was about to shake his face and leave. "No, I don't approve." "Then I resign." "No, hurry up and find those models for me." Tony, who was cornered, slapped his chairman's badge directly in front of Pepper, putting pressure on Pepper. "Okay." Pepper shrugged, indicating she had done her best, before turning to leave. But when Pepper passed by Chen Yun who was watching a play, she suddenly smiled and reached out to grab Chen Yun's arm. "Don't bother the honorable chairman, just." Raising his hand and touching Chen Yun's handsome cheek, Pepper showed a slight smile, "I will personally entertain the distinguished Mr. Chen." What? Looking at Pepper who was doing something to him, Chen Yunren was dumbfounded. What kind of plot is this? Ex-husband. However, The irritated Pepper was not resisted by the innocent Chen Yun. He was quickly dragged to the sofa by Pepper. As soon as she sat down, Pepper sat on Chen Yun's lap coquettishly, wrapped one hand around Chen Yun's waist, and stroked Chen Yun's chest with the other. Such a situation directly exploded Tony's mentality. He wanted to tear Pepper off Chen Yun, but he looked at the two people in front of him. One is his savior, and the other is his secretary. He couldn't move his footsteps, so he could only carefully walk to Chen Yun's side with a smile on his face. Chen, you are still a 17-year-old child. Listen to my brother's advice, you can't handle such a woman. Forehead. Breaking away from Pepper's embrace, Chen Yun was speechless. He really couldn't understand Tony's brain circuit. It has nothing to do with age, although I am very curious about women. But I won't just casually go to a woman I don't know. Hearing this, Tony, who had determined to be a playboy since birth, immediately withered. But the result was good in the end. He quickly said to Pepper, since Chen has already said it, there is no need to entertain. Humph. Glancing at Tony, Pepper didn't stop, and walked out of the villa with a frown. Seeing her leave, Tony breathed a sigh of relief. Glancing at Chen Yun, he quickly took out a bank card from the side drawer. This is Zhang Rudigwo's bank card, with $100 million in it. There is no password on the card. Just treat it as my reward from last time. What is this? Nodding his head, Chen Yun just put the bank card into his pocket, and his eyes were immediately attracted by the device on the table beside him. He asked curiously, are you working on any new weapons? This is the Mark II I designed. With a sigh, Tony explained with a wry smile, I'm hesitating whether to make it or not. Unlike Mark II, its core is made of palladium. Looking at Chen Yun's puzzled look, Tony explained, the palladium element is highly toxic to the human body. If you don't make this new core, just rely on the old core. If I'm lucky, maybe I can live for another few decades. If I'm not lucky, maybe I'll die in the next second. If I replace with this new core, my lifespan will only be a few months. Why do you have to make a battle armor? Looking at Tony with a sad face, Chen Yun asked puzzledly, can't your injury be treated with surgery? The death rate is too high. Sighing, Tony touched the crude core on his chest that was used to sustain life, unless I can find Dr. Strange to perform the operation on me personally. Unfortunately, I heard that he just got into a car accident recently, and his hands are completely useless. Looking at Tony, who knew that his life would end at some point, Chen Yun asked with concern, does Pepper know about your situation? I don't know, I didn't tell her. Tony sighed and shook his head. It's meaningless to tell her about this. On the contrary, if she is worried, it may affect her mood and life. Chen Yun nodded and didn't bring up the matter again. But in his heart, he still feels sorry for Tony. People are alive and still have endless money to spend, but they know that their life is not long. It must be a very uncomfortable thing. Patting Tony on the shoulder, Chen Yun said with a smile, since you are still alive, are you interested in discussing another business? 50 tons of diamonds, are you interested? Opening his fingers, Chen Yun made a 5 gesture, and mysteriously said to Tony, purely natural. Are you serious? Tony looked at Chen Yun in surprise, as if he couldn't believe that Chen Yun really had 50 tons of diamonds. You must know that the total number of diamonds on the entire Earth now is probably only this number. Then what are you waiting for? Hearing the news, no matter how hesitant his heart was, Tony became interested. That is a large diamond of 50 tons. If it is true, it is simply a wealth that is enough to be rich and invincible. Jarvis, bring the test kits, let's set off immediately. Tony excitedly took out a shovel, and at the same time ordered Jarvis to prepare testing equipment. Soon, the well-equipped two came to the Sahara Desert through the portal. Standing on the spot where the diamond was buried before, Chen Yun stomped his feet. It's here, let's dig. After speaking, Chen Yun jumped to the distance. Are you asking me to dig? Tony looked at Chen Yun in confusion, with an incomprehensible expression on his face. He is a super playboy who has dominated New York for decades, the chairman of the Stark Group. Tony Stark, now let yourself dig in the desert. This is really... Looking at the expressionless Chen Yun, Tony rolled up his sleeves, waved the shovel in his hand, and threw himself into the digging work without hesitation. 1 meter, 3 meters. After digging for a full 2 hours, Tony's shovel made a clang sound, as if it had dug something. Wipe off the floating sand on it with your hands, and the crystal clear diamonds are revealed in front of Tony's eyes. Surprisingly, the result of the test directly stunned Tony. It doesn't look like a diamond, does it? Not a diamond. As soon as the inspection results came out, Chen Yun seemed to see countless money flying away before his eyes. He asked depressedly, "Really? I thought this meteorite was worth a lot of money." "Meteorite? You mean meteorite?" Tony's eyes widened, looking at the crystal in front of him, and fell into thinking. "The existing testing equipment is too crude, I need Jarvis to help." Tony quickly got Jarvis' scanning core through the portal. After some operations, the green scanning light shot out from the core, covering the entire crystal. After a while, Jarvis' voice sounded. "It's strange, the elements that make up him are not within our known range. It appears that it is made of a new element." "A new element?" Tony's eyes lit up, and he quickly ordered, "Jarvis, try to analyze the structure of this element." Analysis in progress. 1 care of, 10 care of, 90 care of, 100 care of. Analysis succeeded. This element is similar to the known element palladium, but its quality has been increased dozens of times. What? Hearing this result, Tony was shocked. He never expected that the palladium element he just discovered would discover a stronger new element in the blink of an eye. "Jarvis, quickly analyze the radioactivity of this element." "Realized something," Tony said anxiously. "The analysis was successful, and this element is harmless to the human body." Harmless to the human body. Hearing Jarvis's words, Tony was stunned. Immediately, he grabbed Chen Yun excitedly and said, "Chen, I'm cured, my illness is cured." Unlike the ecstatic Tony, Chen Yun lacked interest. "Without this new element, Iron Man will definitely survive, and everyone in the universe is waiting for him to snap his fingers." But for Chen Yun, his diamonds disappeared immediately, turning into this kind of ghost element. "Congratulations." Shrugging his eyelids, Chen Yun congratulated listlessly, "Congratulations on getting rid of the serious illness." Sighing, Chen Yun said depressedly, "It's just a pity for my money." "What money?" Tony looked at Chen Yun suspiciously. He was still immersed in the joy of getting a new life. "Diamond," Chen Yun said distressedly, "my diamond is gone." "Diamond." Hearing Chen Yun's words, Tony suddenly realized. He smiled and explained, "How is it possible? This new element is much more valuable than diamonds." "What?" Chen Yun's eyes widened, and he looked straight at Tony, as if waiting for Tony to explain. "This is an element more powerful than palladium. Do you know how valuable palladium is? This new element." At the joy of the sermon, the excited Tony danced around the crystal. "It is dozens of times more expensive than palladium. It can be used in aircraft, it can be used in high-end technology." The more Tony talked, the more excited he became. He introduced passionately, "He represents the future development of the Earth." "Is it really so valuable?" Chen Yun's eyes became brighter the more he heard it. Although he was secretly happy, he put on a look of doubt on his face. "Then who are we selling to?" "Sell. We develop it ourselves," Tony excitedly said. "With it, we can even control the lifeblood of this planet." Trying to calm down his excitement, Tony resumed his business tycoon posture. After calmly thinking for a while, Tony said solemnly, "I used to own 50 care of Stark Group's shares. When the stock price plummeted, I bought another part. At present, I should have 60 care of the shares in my hand. This newly discovered element, my suggestion is to develop it through the Stark Group." Patting Chen Yun on the shoulder, Tony smiled and continued, "In order not to make you suffer, I will transfer you 40 care of the shares. From today onwards, you are the largest shareholder of the Stark Group. And Opadri and I are the second and third shareholders." With that said, Tony put his arms around Chen Yun. "Now, you are the new chairman of the Stark Group. The name of the group will become Chen Yun Stark. Quote. Forget it, what the hell name, you still don't need to change it." After rejecting Tony's proposal, Chen Yun, who learned that he was about to become the chairman of the billionaire group, felt a little confused. Tony's actions were very strong. As soon as he returned to his villa, he immediately asked Jarvis to draft the equity transfer document. When Chen Yun was transferring his name to the bookmark, he finally came to his senses. "Think about myself, who was a poor student before, and became the largest shareholder of Trillion Group in a blink of an eye. Such a process is simply a dream. Jarvis, quickly publish this information on our official website. Seeing Chen Yun sign the contract, Tony wished he could study that new element right away. He handed over to Jarvis the procedures that needed to be followed, and then went straight into the laboratory. The news that 40.00% of Stark Group's shares were transferred to other people immediately caused a huge wave in the outside world. The stock price, which was already falling, even went down. Tony Stark, let's talk another day, bye. When Obaday's call came again, Tony, who was devoting himself to researching new elements, didn't even bother to pay attention, and hung up the phone directly. Angrily smashing another tablet to pieces, Obadiah roared with a ferocious face, "I will make you pay the price." Chen Yun stayed at Tony's villa throughout the afternoon. No way, he doesn't know what elements to study. For the sake of his Stark Group, it is necessary to favor Tony, the most powerful man. This future Iron Man is now his cash cow. Just as he was thinking, Chen Yun heard the sound of an explosion from the next door. Frowning and looking over, he saw a tragic scene. Cash cow, it has been bombed beyond recognition. The time traveler's pocket watch. Time went back quickly, and Chen Yun easily prevented the tragedy. Chen, how did you know there was going to be an explosion? Tony, who was pulled out in time, was terrified after seeing the messy laboratory. I just saw your miserable appearance in advance. Chen Yun touched his nose and took out his bat suit. Since the laboratory can't be used today, why not help me upgrade my combat uniform? Batman, so you are Batman. Looking at the black battle suit in front of him, Tony knew it. It turned out that the Batman who was smashing in New York recently turned out to be Chen Yun in front of him. You're Batman, wearing the iron suit, my name should be Iron Man. Excitedly set his nickname, Tony asked curiously, what weapons do you need for your battle suit? No, I don't lack defense. The most critical point of transformation is to be handsome. Handsome. The conditions proposed by Chen Yun made Tony stunned. How handsome do you want to be? As handsome as me. I try my best. Chen Yun no longer knew how much money he had. The Stark Group, after 2 generations of cultivation by Howard Stark and Tony Stark, is already a behemoth. What does 40 care of the shares mean? It means that even with the dividends and interest of the shares, Chen Yun can't spend the rest of his life in debauchery every day. With so much money, what Chen Yun needs to consider is not how to manage money or increase value, that is Tony Stark's business. All he has to do is consume. Wild consumption. Dear Mr. Chen, the manor you need has been successfully purchased. In just 1 hour, Chen Yun bought a manor with the help of money ability. This manor on the Mabry coast is only a few kilometers away from Tony's villa, and it has a beautiful environment and picturesque scenery. The most important thing is that what Chen Yun bought was a private land with absolute privacy and security system. The manor, which covers an area of more than 100 acres, looks like a white castle from the outside. But in fact, it is a group of modern villas. Where did you get the money? When Zhao Shiren came to this magnificent manor, the first reaction in her heart was that Chen Yun went to rob the bank. No, the bank doesn't have that much money. Zhao Shiren, who came to his senses, opened his eyes wide. Could it be? Could it be that a mysterious rich woman gave it to Chen Yun? Thinking about Chen Yun becoming so handsome, it is not impossible. Do I still need to rely on my face? After learning about Zhao Shiren's thoughts, Chen Yun couldn't laugh or cry. However, he didn't explain too much, because relying on a meteorite to become one of the richest people on this planet, this kind of experience is too unreal. Ignoring the jealous Zhao Shiren, Chen Yun installed the artificial intelligence Friday that he got from Tony Stark in his manor system. Hello, Honorable Mr. Chen Yun, welcome back to the manor. When Friday's elegant female voice sounded, the whole manor instantly became comfortable. The air conditioner was automatically adjusted to the most comfortable temperature, and the harsh light of the crystal chandelier softened instantly. The security system in the manor is also controlled by Friday, and every mosquito that enters and exits is even numbered by it. Dear Mr. Chen Yun, the following items are required to upgrade the manor system. Unlike Jarvis, Friday is a female AI. Listening to the gentle voice, Chen Yun agreed to Friday's purchase request without thinking. Nothing else, not bad money. As night fell, lying on the oversized sofa, drinking Law Fight, Chen Yun felt that his past life was wasted. Today's news. The new urban hero, Spider-Man, encountered the Lizard Man in Queens. After the battle between the two, his whereabouts are unknown, and his life and death are unknown. Another dispatch. In the Middle East, the scientist Dr. Ethan was brutally killed by terrorists. According to the investigation, the weapons used by the terrorists were manufactured by the Stark Group. Spider-Man Peter should be fine, it's just a lizard man, just a small scene. But Dr. Ethan is actually dead. Seeing the news of Dr. Ethan's death, Chen Yun narrowed his eyes slightly. Almost at the same time, his cell phone rang. They actually killed Ethan. I want to avenge him. After a brief speech, Tony Stark hung up the phone. In every sense, Dr. Ethan is Tony's savior. Driving the unfinished Mark II, the furious Tony soared into the sky and headed straight for the Middle East. Watching the scene of the Mark II taking off from a distance, Chen Yun also put on his combat uniform silently. He summoned a random door at random, and he arrived in Queens in an instant. Although Peter talks a lot, and as the protagonist, he should not die. But this was in the real world, and Chen Yun, who didn't want Peter to have an accident, came anyway. Oh my car, what the hell is this? Help, who can help me? The lizard virus, which can be infected as long as it is bitten, is the best place for the virus to spread in a densely populated place like Queens. People infected with the virus will instantly become infinitely powerful, their sanity will disappear, and they will become beasts with only killing instincts. And these infected people, while frantically chasing, killing and biting passers-by, spread the virus quickly. At this time, the Queens district has already become a mess due to the rapid spread of the lizard virus. The rapidly spreading virus has also attracted the attention of the military and the government. The entire Queens district was quickly blocked by the military. Any fugitives who want to go out must go through military inspection before they will be released. And this disaster even alarmed S.H.I.E.L.D. They held an emergency meeting, and all UN members had to attend. Kill all the virus in Queens before it takes over all of New York. I propose that Queens be razed to the ground with nuclear weapons. A white-haired man made a proposal at the meeting. I disagree. There are still many civilians who have not evacuated. You are disregarding human life. Such a frenzied proposal was naturally opposed by some members of the parliament. Humane. It's inhumane. But if the virus spreads, it will be a huge catastrophe for the whole world. A black-haired man said in a serious tone. This unexpected biochemical crisis, if not handled properly, may ruin all human beings. This disaster is no longer just what happened in New York, it concerns all mankind. Chin, a member of the United Nations from Washaw District, made a speech that immediately brought the entire meeting to a standstill. Facing such a biochemical disaster, even these high-ranking and powerful people felt a little bit troublesome. We can't stand it anymore, these lizard men are too powerful. They are strong and invulnerable. Retreat. Request retreat. The report from the frontline S.H.I.E.L.D. elite agents became the last straw that broke the camel's back. I agree to the use of nuclear weapons. Agree. Hey, I agree. With the votes of the members, the right to use nuclear weapons was passed. And just as everyone is silently waiting for nuclear weapons to be ready. Another communication from the front. My God, he's so strong. With a burst of noise, things seem to have taken a turn for the better. Soon, a holographic projection appeared in the S.H.I.E.L.D. conference room. Under the full moon, a knight appeared in the camera. This figure dressed in black, who seemed to be one with the night, was surrounded by dense lizard zombies at this time, and seemed extremely lonely. Because of obtaining Wagyu immortal physique, most of Chen Yun's abilities have been evolved. Originally, it was necessary to use the door for the teleportation of the medium, but now it can flash out of thin air. Although in terms of distance, it can only teleport a very short distance, but it is enough to use it in the battle with the lizard army. Through non-stop flashing, Chen Yun's black figure was interspersed among the densely packed lizardmen. Holding a sword in one hand and a technological flying blade in the other. Every time Chen Yun swung his sword, green blood gushed out. His speed was so fast that the lizardmen couldn't catch his movement at all. If it was an ordinary human being, facing such a terrifying killing, he would definitely panic. But on the faces of this group of lizardmen, there is only indifference and madness. In the eyes of the lizard people, every human being is their enemy. Because of the virus, almost no ordinary people were spared when they were attacked by these crazy lizardmen. If they are lucky enough to survive, they will also be infected into lizardmen. And if it died, the corpse would be revived and become a green monster with a tail to join the army of lizardmen. This characteristic made these lizard people swarm from all directions as if they were endless. Relying on the almost unlimited physical strength brought by the Wugu immortal physique, Chen Yun kept strangling a steady stream of lizardmen. "Peter, can you hear me?" While killing, Chen Yun kept calling Peter with the communicator. But what made his heart sink more and more was that Peter didn't respond in any way. And somewhere Chen Yun didn't know, Peter was fainting in a stinky ditch. His communicator was also smashed due to the fierce battle. Jia, lizards are the real masters of the world. Connors, the lizard doctor who has been completely dominated by the wild, is laughing happily at the power of lizard disease. The chief biological scientist of the Osborne group has now become a huge lizard monster. The current him has long lost the gentleness of the past. Yes, only crazy and ferocious. Spider-Man has become his defeat, and Connor's eyes became more violent. "I will succeed." Court death. The lizard man's skin was too hard, and all of Chen Yun's weapons had been rolled. Aware of this, Chen Yun put away his weapon, and then punched like lightning with a bursting fist. The fists landed heavily on the heads of the two lizard men in front of them, smashing their heads in an instant. Then he threw the weapon like a dart, piercing the heads of several lizard men. Chen Yun took a deep breath, and then stomped hard on the ground with both feet. The body jumped into the air suddenly, and then raised his arms high. Bang! Chen Yun, who fell rapidly from the sky, slammed his fist hard on the ground. An invisible shock wave spread from Chen Yun's fist. This shock wave directly crushed dozens of nearby lizard zombies. But it hasn't stopped. Chen Yun's eyes were gradually filled with red. The two hook jades slowly rotated in the eye sockets. Under the gaze of these eyes, the whole world becomes extremely slow. Go! Signaling the survivors hidden in the house to follow him, Chen Yun started a feast of killing. My God, who the hell is he? Behind Chen Yun, the survivors looked at the scene in front of them in surprise. The lizard man is in his hands, like an old man with slow movements. Could it be that he is a legendary superhero? At this moment, Chen Yun showed his powerful destructive power and his wisdom. With Wugu immortal physique, he is completely invulnerable to lizard men's attacks. His hands and face were covered with lizard man's green blood, but it slipped from his body quietly. Under his attack, all the lizard men blocking the way were smashed to pieces. When he rushed out of Queens with the survivors and came to the military. Chen Yun has already killed lizard men. My God, who the hell is he? He's 100 times more powerful than those green-skinned monsters. It's horrible. How did this person do it? Watching the large red dots monitoring the lizard man disappear quickly, the members of S.H.I.E.L.D. were shocked. And when everyone was silent, a voice suddenly sounded. With him, do we still need to launch nuclear weapons? These words exploded in everyone's ears like a bolt from the blue. They woke up suddenly. If anyone can completely wipe out the lizard man, is there anyone else besides Chen Yun? Suspension of preparations for nuclear weapons. Keep all elite agents close to this Batman. Assist him. Get rid of these lizard men. Counselor Chin spoke first. As a person who became a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. because of his ideals and ambitions, Chin's thoughts were very pure. Protect all mankind, and defend this planet. If it weren't for the terrible lizard virus, who would bear the infamy of using nuclear weapons? Following the order, the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. who were about to evacuate gathered in Chen Yun's direction. This is too much. Handing over the survivors brought out to the military, Chen Yun just took a breath when he discovered that a group of lizardmen surrounded him at some point behind him. He killed more than one lizardman in half an hour. Although he was very tired, Chen Yun had no intention of stopping. Chen Yun's idea is very simple. Since the lizard man was transformed from a human being, there must be a limit. As long as all the lizard men are wiped out, this crisis will naturally disappear. Chen Yun. While Chen Yun was fighting bloody battles, the Black Widow Natasha finally found him. Unlike Chen Yun, Natasha is proficient in various assassination methods. Encountering this kind of lizardman with hard skin and extremely high defense is like encountering a nemesis. Even being able to get here is only based on the experience of evasion rather than force. Dagger. Hearing the voice, Chen Yun just raised his head and saw Natasha in a panic. He shouted, and suddenly appeared behind Natasha. One punch smashed the big lizardman behind Natasha. Chen Yun caught Natasha and threw the dagger. With the new weapon, Chen Yun protected Natasha, and frantically attacked the surrounding lizardmen with the dagger. During the tense killing, his Sharingan evolved accordingly. But with the lizardmen constantly pouring out, he didn't have time to study at all. On the other side, because of Connor's roar and the screams outside, Peter slowly woke up from his coma. Connors, hand over the antidote quickly. Did you hear that? It's hell outside because of you. Spider-Man, I won't. Get the hell out of my head. Because of Peter's yelling, the souls of the evil Dr. Lizard and the kind Connors struggled intertwined. There is no antidote. Spider-Man, we have no antidote. Two different voices resounded alternately in the roar. What? Finally, after a loud howl of pain, with a distorted and crazy face, Dr. Lizard rushed towards Peter. Fire! With a booming sound, the tanks drove into Queens. The roof of the car was full of heavily armed soldiers, with a large number of weapons behind them. Hot smoke was blowing from the muzzle of the tank, and in front of the tank, dozens of lizardmen were blown to pieces. Because Chen Yun made everyone see hope, everyone followed suit. Looking at the corpse of the lizard man crushed by the tracks, Chen Yun's face was as calm as water. With the support of the military, he finally won a respite after fighting for a long time. Natasha, go! After crushing the heads of the two lizardmen with his bare hands, Chen Yun reminded the Black Widow Natasha to move quickly. Hearing Chen Yun's shout, the widow in Natasha's hand shot out a chain. The chain hooked to the roof of the building beside her, and Natasha quickly climbed up along the slender rope. And when she was rising rapidly, she also used a pistol to accurately hit the eyes of the lizardman who was climbing the outer wall of the building. When Natasha went up to the rooftop, Chen Yun also appeared on the rooftop. He took a breath, began to recover and gather his strength. Hi boy. While Chen Yun was resting, a Kun-type fighter appeared on the top of the building. A man wearing a star-striped blue suit with a shield jumped off the fighter plane. Wearing a hood, he greeted Chen Yun appreciatively, and rushed into the lizard pile without hesitation. Captain America Steve Rogers. This fierce man who fell from the sky made Chen Yun's eyes condense slightly. In the observation of Sharingan, Steve's arms and legs were obviously still stiff after thawing. This American team can deal with it. If something happens, he will really do it. Obviously just thawed, but rushed to the extremely dangerous Queens district at the first time. Captain America's title of Light of the Americas is indeed not in vain. List. A voice came from Kunshi above his head. Chen Yun looked up and saw that it was Gemma, the logistics experimenter. At the same time, two brand new steel chopping knives were thrown from the fighter plane. Reaching out to hold the two steel chopping knives in his hand, Chen Yun wanted to step forward to help Steve. But the daredevil Matthew, who appeared in a hurry, stopped him. Matthew's nimble figure walked among the giant lizardmen, and from time to time he accurately pierced the lizardman's head with a short stick. Chen, sure enough, you are here. Spider-Man Peter fell from the sky, holding Dr. Connors, a lizard entangled in spider webs. Sorry, I couldn't stop Dr. Lizard's plan. Peter's expression was gloomy. At this time, he had long since lost the mood of talking too much in the past. Don't worry, Peter. Looking at the lost Peter, Chen Yun shook his head and smiled wryly. He also didn't expect that a mere Dr. Lizard could make such a big commotion in New York. It's nothing to develop an alliance. Chen Yun was very annoyed when he thought that he had given up his vigilance because of playing games. He patted Peter on the shoulder and comforted him, "You've done enough." Just when Chen Yun wanted to say a few more words of comfort, a burst of passionate music broke out in the sky. Accompanied by the sound of roaring, a steel suit descended from the sky. Hi Chen, it looks like you're in a bit of trouble. The mask was raised, and a smiling Tony Stark appeared above the rooftop. You're so slow. Looking at the angry Iron Man writhing in the sky, Chen Yun smiled and said, "Is your matter settled?" "Oh, I just went to the Middle East. You actually said I was late." Tony pouted, with an unhappy expression on his face, but his hands were not slow at all, and a laser shot smashed the lizard man climbing up to the roof. Boy, what era is this? After killing the only 4 remaining lizardmen on the roof, Steve put his hands on his hips and asked Chen Yun, "These lizardmen are too crazy." "Crazy with you? Has your body thawed? Just use them to warm up." Sideways avoiding the attack of the lizardmen who had just climbed onto the roof, Steve said with a relaxed expression, "These big guys are much easier to deal with than the enemies of World War II. Since everyone is here." Looking at the people on the rooftop, Chen Yun only felt a little dreamy. Black Widow Natasha, Daredevil Matthew, Spider-Man Peter, Captain America Steve, Iron Man Tony. Plus him, Batman. Unknowingly, a luxurious team comparable to the Avengers gathered on the rooftop. Stretching his body, Chen Yun said with a smile, "Let's start this action." After finishing speaking, Chen Yun jumped down from the roof, and fell into the group of lizards downstairs with a cold face. "Little guy, don't forget me." Natasha smiled softly, then followed the rope to another rooftop, and kept shooting to support Chen Yun. All of a sudden, all the superheroes showed their abilities, descended from the rooftop one after another, and gathered around Chen Yun. "Hi everyone, you can call me Spider-Man." Peter, who had recovered his mood, looked at the superheroes around him, his eyes sparkled, and the chatterbox attribute was turned on again. "Can you leave your contact information?" "Well, can we contact again when we are free? When it's over?" While shooting the lizard man, Tony smiled at Peter and said, "We can go have a barbecue together." "Don't mention the barbecue." Chen Yun, who kept flashing among the lizard people and harvested the life of the lizard people in cold blood, shouted with a chill all over his body, "If you mention barbecue again, I will beat you to death." "Ha ha ha, are you ever afraid?" Seeing Chen Yun's expression, Tony laughed loudly, and at the same time fired missiles at a group of zombies. "There are too many of them." Using the shield to withstand the attack of a lizard man, Steve took a deep breath. "How many monsters are there?" "Look what I found." Before Steve could answer, he heard Tony's breath above his head. "Iron Man, please stop swearing," Steve complained, and then looked in the direction Tony found. "Oh, S******T. Seeing this, Steve couldn't help scolding. In Steve's sight, a wriggling lizard man is constantly merging with the surrounding green monsters. And those green monsters are the monsters that were killed by everyone just now. This lizard man actually devoured the corpse of the monster and turned it into his own nourishment. "Hey, your level of swearing is a bit outdated." After teasing Steve, Tony's face became serious. "Whoa, my spider sense detected a strong danger signal." Peter, who had almost consumed the spider silk and was fighting the lizard man with his bare hands, also noticed something wrong. "It can't be allowed to continue to fuse, it must be resolved in advance." Looking at the huge figure wriggling non-stop, Chen Yun said with a serious expression. At that moment, his subordinates exerted force and immediately knocked away the surrounding lizardmen. Chen Yun went straight to the giant lizard and rushed over. The giant lizard monster is constantly absorbing the corpses of the surrounding lizardmen. In an instant, the monster's body grew to tens of meters. Facing such an enemy, Chen Yun did not choose to hold back anything. With the super explosive power endowed by Wugu immortal physique, every step he steps on the ground will cause a huge roar. Accompanied by this loud noise, the entire area seemed to shake. And those lizardmen who originally wanted to stop Chen Yun were all thrown out one after another. Roar! The giant lizard that Chen Yun was staring at sensed the danger, and it roared angrily. But its huge body couldn't keep up with the lightning-fast Chen Yun at all. Before it could react, the giant lizard's head was blown away by Chen Yun's punch. Chen Yun, who was still in the air, turned around and saw the fast-healing head of the giant lizard. In just 2 or 3 seconds, the big hole in the giant lizard's head has completely healed. "Look at me." Seeing that Chen Yun's blow was useless, Iron Man Tony gathered energy in the palms of both hands, and an energy cannon shot directly into the chest of the giant lizard. But what was different from what he had imagined was that the light cannon that gathered more than half of the energy of the suit, after hitting the giant lizard, was like sinking into the sea. Except for hitting a white spot, it had no effect. Roar! The repeated attacks of Chen Yun and Tony completely angered the giant lizard. It roared loudly, and a pair of big hands slapped the sky and covered the sky, directly smashing a building beside it to pieces. "Do we have more firepower?" Dodging the falling rubble in the air, Tony frowned and asked, "This thing is much harder than other lizards. Request fire support." Natasha on the rooftop also noticed the situation below, and she quickly pressed her headset communicator. Soon, more than a dozen tanks from the military came to the frontal battlefield. Immediately afterwards, a terrifying pillar of fire erupted from the barrel of the tank at the same time. With a loud roar, the shell hit the chest of the giant lizard, blasting a bloody hole several meters away. But what is surprising is that the seemingly ferocious wound of the giant lizard only spattered a trace of blood. Obviously, these powerful shells did not really hurt this monster. Although the effect is not great, please continue to attack. Seeing that the giant lizard was not injured, but was being hit back by the huge shock wave, Tony's tone relaxed. Standing on the ruins of the building, Chen Yun frowned tightly. His fist didn't have much effect on the huge body of the giant lizard. And the shells of these tanks, although the monsters were blown up with flesh and blood, obviously they couldn't really kill it. Is this lizard immortal? Looking at the shattered body of the giant lizard but healed in an instant, Steve wiped his cold sweat and said, "And why does it feel like it's getting bigger and bigger?" The ordinary lizardmen who were killed by the aftermath of the artillery fire became the best nourishment for the giant lizards. By absorbing the same kind, the body of the giant lizard quickly grew larger. Soon, its body was even taller than the surrounding buildings. "It's so tall." Peter, who was glued to the building, looked up at the giant lizard in despair, swallowed and said, "It's already more than 200 meters high. How else can we kill it?" Hearing Peter's description, Chen Yun frowned and thought. The wounds that are enough to kill an ordinary lizard man have no effect on this huge lizard monster. Even if any door is used to cut the space, a space that is too small is still a drop in the bucket. Moreover, the monster does not seem to have such vital organs as the heart and brain. My God, what kind of monster is this? Just when the heroes were at a loss for what to do with the giant lizard, members of S.H.I.E.L.D. were also shocked to observe the monster through the video. A monster of this size, it's unbelievable. When there was chaos inside S.H.I.E.L.D., different voices sounded again. Should we continue to use nuclear weapons? The monster is so huge, and its absorption capacity is so strong, if it can carry nuclear weapons and absorb nuclear radiation, it will become as powerful as the Hulk. Mentioning Hulk, everyone's faces darkened. The congressmen who have no other options can only cast their hope on those superheroes who are fighting on the spot. Should I fly directly into its mouth? Seeing the lizard behemoth's slow movements, Tony made a suggestion: detonate the missile straight from its stomach, bang. Do you want to be absorbed by him? Although this can be regarded as a solution, who knows what is going on in the body of the giant lizard? The biggest possibility is that it can only be absorbed by the giant lizard. Thinking of this, Chen Yun immediately rejected Tony's proposal. I didn't expect that after 70 years of sleep, the world would look like this when I woke up. Steve sighed, frowning at the lizard behemoth. Hey, my body. Struggling to kill an ordinary lizard man, Matthew gasped for breath while hugging his injured body. Who will become Ultraman? When everyone was at a loss, Peter descended from the sky and asked innocently, I think we need Ultraman now. Who is Ultraman? Steve, out of date, asked suspiciously, is he also a superhero? That's a cosmic hero in a tight suit. Tony glanced at Peter speechlessly, and then explained, unfortunately, it's just a cartoon. This inconspicuous conversation immediately made everyone around them smile. But Chen Yun was the only one who was stunned when he heard Peter's words. I can transform too. Chen Yun, who had been thinking for a long time, suddenly spoke, and his words immediately attracted the attention of everyone except Steve. Under everyone's shocked gaze, Chen Yun smiled and said, just kidding, I won't become huge. However, I have probably solved it. Just as he was about to continue speaking, Chen Yun suddenly felt the energy gathering rapidly in his eyes. Feeling the energy provided by Sharingan, Chen Yun quickly sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. Wow, cool. Seeing that Chen Yun had come up with a solution, Peter just wanted to continue speaking, but as if he was afraid of disturbing Chen Yun, he quickly bit the tip of his tongue and covered his mouth. The power of my left eye is to control the space. And the right eye, pointing to his right eye, Chen Yun said in a deep voice. The power of the right eye is called Amaterasu. It can release black flames to burn the enemy. The fire of Amaterasu will never cease until the enemy is burned. Opening my eyes, the original Guyu has unknowingly turned into a kaleidoscope Sharingan. This kind of flame is enough to burn this giant lizard to death. Under everyone's gaze, Chen Yun took off the Batman blindfold that had been covering his eyes. Stretching out his hand and pointing at the giant lizard in front of him, Chen Yun let out a loud shout. Amaterasu! Amaterasu! Chen Yun looked ahead, the Sharingan in his right eye was running wildly, and black ripples spread out round after round. Everything in the surrounding space became extremely clear to him, even the few ants hidden on the bluestone slab at the bottom of his feet could not escape his gaze. When his eyes turned to the giant lizard, a black flame flashed through Chen Yun's eyes. In an instant, the body of the giant lizard was covered with flames. The fire was extremely ferocious. At first it only existed around the waist of the giant lizard, but in an instant, the flames spread to the whole body of the monster. Roar! The horrific howl of the giant lizard resounded throughout Queens, and everyone's heart skipped a beat when they heard the horrific scream. The vital signs of the monster are weakening. Iron Man Tony, who was always observing with a detector, cried out excitedly. Wow, this is really cool. Looking enviously at Chen Yun, Spider-Man Peter smacked his lips. I thought you could only use your eyes to discharge electricity. I didn't expect, your eyes can set fire. In just 70 years, people today have evolved to this point. Watching Chen Yun showing off his might, Captain America Steve muttered to himself. The fierce flames kept devouring the huge body of the giant lizard. But soon, Chen Yun realized something was wrong. The flame of Amaterasu is gradually extinguishing. It's shedding its skin. Natasha, the Black Widow on the roof of the building, saw the strange change of the monster, and shouted loudly, it is using its skin to avoid the flames. Amaterasu. Chen Yun quickly increased the output of Sharingan. At the same time, he felt a slight pain from his right eye. It only took so little time, can't the eyes take it? Silently perceiving his own state, Chen Yun stared intently at the giant lizard constantly struggling under the black flames. Under the gaze of Sharingan, the skin of the giant lizard that was supposed to be struggling in the flames was squirming crazily. After a while, an extra layer of skin appeared on the giant lizard's body. Most of the black flames are resisted by this layer of skin. Asshole. In order to avoid eye injury, Chen Yun had to stop using Sharingan. But when it was about to close, Chen Yun looked around. The ordinary lizard man hiding in the corner and staring at everyone has become Chen Yunxin's target. Death to me, Chen Yun snarled, and black flames suddenly burst out from all the lizard men. The flame followed like a shadow, directly enveloping the lizard man. They didn't even have time to make any screams, and they turned into a pool of black ashes without a sound. With this blow alone, all the lizard men were wiped out. Chen, well done. The black flame was slowly extinguished, and Tony hurriedly used the energy cannon to continue to harass the giant lizard. How did I find out that it has become smaller? Is it small? Why do I still feel so big? Peter looked up and felt that the giant lizard was still so tall after being burned for a long time. It doesn't matter if he is big or small. Feeling the changes in Sharingan, Chen Yun said, just do it. Transformation. Chen Yun closed his eyes, and turned his kaleidoscope Sharingan with all his strength. Cooperating with the powerful Wugu immortal physique, a skeleton composed of golden energy slowly emerged from behind him. God, this guy is not small. Looking at this golden half-length skeleton more than 10 meters high, even the well-informed Tony couldn't help but be speechless. Susano, Chen Yun yelled violently, and then slowly drew out the steel chopping knife. Behind him, the golden skull also made the same movement at the same time. This. Steve opened his mouth wide in surprise. He didn't expect that the skeleton could also draw a knife. What shocked him the most was that with the movement of the skeleton, the spots of light gathered rapidly. In an instant, a huge steel chopping knife of the same style as Chen Yun's hand appeared in the skeleton's hand. This. Daredevil Matthew had never seen such a scene before. He stared at Chen Yun dumbfounded and was speechless for a long time. In the same mood as Matthew was Natasha on the rooftop. Natasha, who was far away from everyone, felt an astonishing sense of oppression ever since the appearance of the golden skull. Under the shroud of this terrifying aura, she felt as if she was being attacked by death, as if she might lose her life at any time. This little guy has grown to this point. While her beautiful eyes were changing, Natasha stared at the brilliant Chen Yun in a daze. Kill. Following Chen Yun's order, the golden skull clenched the steel chopping knife in its hand, and slashed at the giant lizard. The posture of the golden skull wielding the steel chopping knife looks extremely clumsy, like a baby who has just learned to walk, toddling forward. But with the swing of the knife, a majestic sense of oppression suddenly descended on the giant lizard. One arm of the giant lizard was cut off in the shock of everyone. Ow! The pain of the broken arm made the giant lizard howl in pain. Because of the huge wound, the ability to heal quickly has also slowed down. The enraged giant lizard swung its giant fist angrily and came to attack Chen Yun. Not to be outdone, Chen Yun controlled the golden skull to confront it with a steel chopping knife. Boom! There was a huge impact and it exploded suddenly, and the dust also rose into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the two huge monsters had clashed countless times. To everyone's surprise, although the golden skull is more than 10 times smaller than the giant lizard, the golden skull can withstand every attack with ease. Even with the steel chopping knife, every time they confront each other, they can chop off a piece of flesh from the giant lizard. It's over. After dozens of blows against the giant lizard, Chen Yun suddenly let out a low growl, and then closed his eyes tightly. The huge body of the golden skull disappeared in place in an instant. When the giant lizard was looking for the enemy at a loss, the golden skull had already flashed behind it. Die! Accompanied by Chen Yun's loud shout, the golden skull's steel-chopping knife swung violently. The waist of the giant lizard suddenly appeared bloody. The giant lizard was cut in half with a single knife. Amaterasu. Amid the miserable screams of the monitor lizard, Chen Yun suppressed the discomfort and activated Amaterasu again. The huge body of the giant lizard was instantly wiped out in the black flames. God, this is too strong. The powerful battle between Chen Yun and the giant lizard completely stunned everyone. Chen, you really. For a moment, Peter was so shocked that he rubbed his eyes, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. And Steve, a veteran of many battles, just stood aside and doubted his life. Wow, I'm thinking about the prototype of the anti-lizard armor. Tony let out a weird cry, and sighed for his stillborn new invention. If I had known it earlier, I would have saved you from burning so thoroughly. Finished. Natasha flew down from the rooftop. She was tired and paralyzed and almost couldn't stand still. She looked at Chen Yun with beautiful eyes and asked, I don't want to fight anymore. Ended. Sharingan looked around, and after confirming that the giant lizard was really dead, Chen Yun heaved a sigh of relief and responded with a smile, we won. Boy, you are strong. Putting the shield behind his back, Steve breathed a sigh of relief. Without enemies, several superheroes just stood awkwardly. They moved their mouths and wanted to say something on the scene, but the process of making soy sauce almost all the way finally made them awkward in place. Well, leave a phone number. In an awkward atmosphere, Peter took out a pen and paper and wrote his phone number to everyone. Little guy, you are so cute. Touching Peter's head, Tony handed his phone number to Peter dumbfounded. Well, what's a phone number? Steve on the side was a little embarrassed. This Captain America, who still has the memory of 70 years ago, let alone a mobile phone, he has even seen a BB machine. You can use this. Seeing Steve's embarrassment, Tony took out a communicator in time. Mr. Howard, looking at this familiar communicator, Steve's memory seemed to return to World War II, and he asked tremblingly, are you? The guy you mentioned should be my father. Tony smiled and explained to Steve, he died very early, though. Speaking of which, when I was a child, I heard your story. Mr. Tony Stark, I also grew up listening to your stories. Seeing that the signature on his hand turned out to be the famous Tony Stark, Peter jumped up excitedly. Peter's offline behavior made Chen Yun roll his eyes. Little guy, your skill is very good, I hope to see your outstanding performance in the future. Tony admired Spider-Man, who has been fighting on the front line, and he praised him while extending his hand to Peter. I will keep your words in mind. Excitedly taking off the glove stained with lizard blood, Peter held Tony's hand excitedly, your armor is so cool. Is it? Tony smiled, and continued to praise Peter, your combat uniform and spider silk launcher are not bad either. Really, thank you for your compliment. Being praised by Tony one after another, Peter scratched his head shyly. Peter boy, Chen Yun, who was tired and collapsed next to Natasha, complained with twitching corners of his mouth. When he knew my identity, he wasn't so excited. Can you be excited now? Natasha lightly touched Chen Yun with her elbow, and jokingly said, the little hero who saved New York. Then, do you want my autograph? Let's talk about it later when we find a place where no one is around. Natasha chuckled and teased, you can sign in the right place. Cut. Ignoring Natasha's ridicule, Chen Yun lay wearily in the ruins, yawning so tired that he didn't want to move a finger. The giant lizards were eliminated, and the remaining ordinary lizardmen were no longer a threat. The peacekeeping troops flooded into Queens to clean up the mess, and the lizardmen in the corner were also quickly wiped out. I'm going to go first. Afraid of meeting the officials and the army, Daredevil Matthew greeted Chen Yun, covered his wound and hurriedly disappeared into the night. Don't you need to bandage him? Looking at Matthew's staggering steps, Steve said worriedly. No, that guy has long been used to it. Chen Yun, who had dealt with Matthew several times, explained with a smile, as long as he doesn't die, he will be alive and kicking soon. There are reporters. As the peacekeeping army approached, the reporter hiding behind the soldiers was revealed. Seeing these reporters holding microphones, Peter immediately panicked. Please, you still have a mask on your face. Looking at Peter, who was so frightened that he was about to jump up and down, Chen Yun shook his head and smiled wryly, and you are not a criminal, but a hero who saved New York. After finishing speaking, Chen Yun touched the face exposed by throwing away the blindfold, and said mockingly, it should be me who should get out of the way. If you show up for an interview, maybe we can lure the criminal here. Tony opened his steel mask and excitedly proposed, why don't we just accept the interview? I feel like you just want to show off. Chen Yun complained about Tony's reckless behavior. Dear Stark Group Chairman, if you want the stock price to skyrocket. Tony smiled, moved to Chen Yun's side, and said to Chen Yun meaningfully, as long as you put on a cool pose to deal with the media. Well, I'll think about it. Chen Yun nodded with bright eyes, and then turned his gaze to Steve, who had been looking at the surrounding high-rise buildings. Steve, do you know that you have an exclusive museum? I can probably guess. Steve smiled awkwardly, and was about to speak when he was interrupted by the excited Peter. I can do this all day. Peter lamely imitates Steve's accent, your epitaph is wonderful. The school even organized us to send you flowers. Quote question mark quote. Steve looked at Peter speechlessly, unable to utter a word. I think we should form an organization. After resting for a while, Chen Yun stood up, and he loudly said to the surrounding superheroes, the name of the organization is Super Boys Team. Hey, Natasha grabbed Chen Yun's clothes and protested softly, you should respect the only lady here. Sorry, I forgot about you. Chen Yun spread his hands and expressed his apology, I will think of another name. I want to join. This is so cool. Peter immediately raised his hand, loudly responding to Chen Yun's proposal. Sorry, we have an age requirement here. Facing Peter, Chen Yun smirked and refused, you are really too young. You're as old as me. Who made me the initiator of the rules? Chen Yun shrugged, not caring about Peter's anger at all. What is our team name? As soon as Tony opened his mouth curiously, everyone reacted immediately, and they said the names in their hearts at the same time. Veteran Roaring Team, Steel Legion, Female Fist Guard. Hearing these crappy names, Chen Yun said speechlessly, why, is it called the Justice League? I figured it out. Peter suddenly yelled, which immediately attracted everyone's attention, it's called the Spider Family. Hearing the outrageous name that popped out of Peter's mouth, Chen Yun's hard-won Sharingan almost turned into a blank stare. Forget it, Chen Yun said speechlessly, the name is actually not important. Yes, there is still a lot of time. Tony also shook his head and agreed, we can think about it slowly. I still think the veteran Howlers are a better fit for our team. Steve sighed regretfully, and sighed that the name he had proposed hadn't been chosen. Where are the veterans? Are you referring to these two minors? Natasha raised her eyebrows aside and said, she is very sensitive to age, I feel like you need a punch. Following the failure of naming, the chatter that was still in full swing gradually faded away. In the end, it was Chen Yun who stood up and said helplessly. Since there is a disagreement, the superhero team can only come to an end temporarily. Reporters, they are already surrounded. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.